It's a Wednesday night. Therefore, here at the Voice of College Football, it is time to talk that very subject with all of you. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. If you're stopping by for a first time, or maybe you've just caught a video or two, actually had a conversation with one of our loyal supporters this afternoon who said, Mark, there was somebody out there that did not know that the Voice of College Football, that you are here talking college football with everyone. They didn't know who you were. Wow, I was floored. I was just flummoxed by that. Welcome in, everyone. We've got the link in the chat. Please give me a call in college football. I counted up the days today. 66 24-hour sessions until we get to opening night on August 26th. That's a Saturday. Week one, of course, 1 week later or 5 days later with the big Thursday night games, Nebraska, Minnesota. And on that Thursday night, help me out, I believe Utah and Florida kick off on a Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. But a couple nice games, as always, on a Thursday night. And so we can't wait for college football. Just over a month away, 66 days. So we're looking at just over 2 months. Just over 2 months away from the opening of college football. Let me properly identify myself on screen. There we go. And I guess we're going with the Florida State colors and look tonight. We just left our Miami show. Michigan at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. That's the run of shows each and every Wednesday night. And now we are releasing and diving into our summer schedule. So not only will we have 3 consecutive team channel blocks at 5, 6, and 7 with Michigan, Florida State, and Miami, we will also have a call-in show every Wednesday at this time, 8 Eastern. Speaking of 8 Eastern, what I expected to be doing for the last 15 or 20 minutes was to be on a radio hit with a Charlotte all-sports radio station. I apologize. I don't know the exact call letters of the Charlotte radio station, but my story of the day is that I was contacted by a Charlotte radio station. I believe it's WFNZ. And they asked me to do a radio hit to talk college football. I, of course, said absolutely. And so the fine folks at the Charlotte radio station said, we'll see you Wednesday at 8. I'm doing like 14 things at the same time as I typically do, even though I'm not a great multitasker. This business has kind of forced me into that, although my former job actually forced me into multitasking as well as I possibly could. But I'm a very focused individual typically. But anyway, doing like 15 things at the same time. I'm just answering this DM. Yeah, see you Wednesday at 8. Let's mark this on my calendar. Boom, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I've got a Charlotte radio hit. Okay. Problem was, it wasn't at 8 o'clock p.m. that they meant. They just said, we'll see you at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Well, it's a morning radio show. And therefore, I was up late last night. I typically don't stay up this late, but I was just on a roll. Editing, doing other things for the channels, and I was just up all night, couldn't go to sleep, didn't try to go to sleep until like 5:15. Jump into bed, had my alarm set for 9 anyway, because I had a breakfast scheduled with a couple of friends, and so the phone went off at 8 o'clock in the morning after I had been in bed for 2.5 hours, and it was the Charlotte producer at the radio station saying, "Hi, Mark, you ready to roll? We'll have you on the air in 2 minutes." I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You told me, I thought it was 8 o'clock at night. No, sorry about that. So I thought, do I just kind of talk myself out of this and say, you know what? I'm not coherent right now. I cannot barely think, let alone come up with the name Cade Klubnik right now. That's just not going to happen. I need time to ease into my day a little bit. I'm not a coffee drinker. And when you get the phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning to talk college football when you've slept for 2.5 hours, but I thought, you know what? Hey, it's exposure for the voice of college football. Got to go through with this. And so hopefully it was coherent. I have not heard it. I will be passing on the link as soon as that gets posted. The fine folks at the Charlotte radio station, again, WFNZ comes to mind, did say that they post that to their site. So we will pass that along. We're going to get started with a phone call. No reason for me to start up some topics here because we've got Jeffrey on the line to talk up some college football. So always good to hear from Jeffrey. How you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing really good. I appreciate that, and that was a crazy story. I mean, I can't imagine being in that situation at all. But one thing you are 100% correct about is the nature of trying to keep up with sports. I mean, it's morning, noon, and night all over the place. News happening everywhere, and you're trying to keep up with everything while still living your life. It is insane.
Yeah, when I got that call at 8 o'clock in the morning and my phone said Charlotte, North Carolina, it didn't take me long to remember, oh, Lord, I thought this was at 8 o'clock tonight. And I got on the phone and I, of course, want to put on a good display on the radio. I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about to an audience that's never heard from me. So I thought about talking myself out of it and expressed to the guy, you're not necessarily going to get the best out of me here. I'm gonna try, but hopefully it made sense. And they asked me about Nick Saban. They asked me to compare Clemson and Florida State, and they asked me about all sorts of different things.
I'm sure it went well. I mean, you do a fantastic job, so I'm sure it definitely turned out a-okay, probably better than that even. So, I mean, to your point about what the live stream is about, can you be a fan and be unbiased? That right there, that headline is really intriguing because all I know is there's a lot of people that are fanatics about their team, and they'll go at great lengths to trash the rival of their team that they root for or anything else like that. And then you got people that are kind of chill, but underneath there's still some underlying tones of, they get really upset about, if a team they don't like beats their team. So most people, some try not to be biased, but it's definitely very hard.
So, Jeffrey, one of the things that led me to this topic, not the only thing, but one of the things is that we had this show. I don't know if you caught any of it late last week. We sized up 1997 Nebraska against 1997 Michigan. They split a national championship. They both went undefeated to kind of size up the teams, the stats, the results, and who may have won a matchup. My final conclusion, which is the same conclusion I've had ever since 1997, was both of these schools earned a national championship. There is no way to distinguish and say Michigan would have won that game, or Michigan played a tougher schedule, or they were better, they should have won the national championship solely by themselves, or the same thing with Nebraska. I think it's completely ludicrous to say that one or the other should be the national champion and not the other. Okay. I expect nothing less than for Michigan fans to say, oh, we would have won that game. We're the national champion. They don't deserve it. We deserve it. We had a tougher schedule. We played in the Big Ten, da, 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 da. Nor do I expect Nebraska fans to do anything but say, shoot, we won our conference championship game by 39 points. We beat Peyton Manning in Tennessee in the Orange Bowl by 25 points. We were the better team, da, 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 da. That's exactly what I expect. But at least admit you are biased. Of course you are. No, I got that for the entire night, but people were adding on to that. Oh, I'm not biased. Come on. If Jeffrey, if sports fans weren't biased in a situation like that, you would have just as many Michigan fans saying, you know what? I love our team. We won the national championship. I love that we did. But you know what, man, Nebraska probably would have won that game. They were probably better. And we would have had Nebraska fans say the same thing if people were logical and watched the games without a filter and they just watched the games and were able to strip away the bias, because it would just be a 50-50 split.
Yeah,
but it
100%. I
would be
mean,
completely random.
both those teams were fantastic. From watching them, and I can see how both fan bases would think that. But to your point, when you are a fan of a team and then you say that, yes, you are biased, you wouldn't be saying it otherwise. And I think that's what makes sports talk so funny to begin with. Is just the amount of people that try so hard not to be biased, but you are. It's kind of like we had the discussion the other day, with Tim and about Brian Kelly and all that and Lincoln
Oh
Riley.
no.
And like you said that you're an Ohio State fan, but when you're live and on air, you're doing videos, you do everything in your power not to say, oh, I'm an Ohio State fan, we're better than everyone else in the Big Ten by far, all that kind of stuff. Even if that's true, most years, me, there are teams that I like. I talk about Indiana. I talk about my ancestry's team is Alabama. All my older family members love Alabama. And I'm live in North Carolina, so I like North Carolina. It's the teams that I guess you could say root for the most. But I try to be as completely unbiased as possible because of the fact that, if I've got people watching me for, or watching you for other teams besides those teams, and you're just trashing those teams, those people aren't going to want to watch you unless they're into that sort of thing. And I mean, it's not, I don't think that's the best way to go about it for sure. I mean, when you're on air, you got to be chill about it, but everybody has undertones. Everybody inside is slightly biased. I think if you truly like sports and you like a team, yeah, there's no way you can't be.
And even if you believe psychology, and I do in this way, that even if you take a situation or a game that you have no involvement in, you have no rooting interest in. Let's say you're just watching UCLA and Washington State play. Just because of your background, what you like, what you don't like, you still see that game in a certain light based on your background and experiences and what you like and don't like, that skews your viewpoint of that game, even if it's just that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane because, like, that game, for example, there's some people that I know that, like, to your point, they don't care about either team, but you'll have one person that's like, okay, I like UCLA because, they're like the more of the brand team, or whatever, and like they're more nationally recognized. But then you'll have some people that'll be like, okay, I'm kind of going for the underdog here. Hope Washington State pulls it off. It's like you don't even like either team, but you're watching it. Because I used to, I had a neighbor that, me and him would always go back and forth about games. And we didn't even care about either team. And he would pick one and I would pick one just out of the blue at the beginning of the game. We were really little and didn't even know which teams were good. And sometimes I picked the team that was actually no good and I didn't know that they weren't. I'm like, I should have picked the other team. We didn't care about either team. It was like, I wanted that team to win because I picked them to win at the beginning and he picked the other team. And it's just no emotional attachment. It's what makes sports awesome. It doesn't even matter if you care or not. It adds to it.
Absolutely. And just take like a controversial call in sports that was extremely close. Otherwise, it wouldn't be controversial if it wasn't close. You're an NFL fan, right?
I do watch a lot of NFL for sure.
So one example of a controversial call that was not close would be when the New Orleans wide receiver was basically blindsided at the end of the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago against the Los Angeles Rams, that there should have been a flag thrown. There wasn't. It most likely cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. Now, that would be a controversial call because it just got totally missed. But there are a lot of controversial calls that are like, it's so close, who knows what was it supposed to be? Well, again, case in point, if you ask fans of each side, 99.9, and I would say 100%, because that's all I hear is 100%. I don't even hear from the 0.1%, but I'll say there's got to be somebody out there somewhere. So it's 99.9% of the fans that say, for example, 2003 Fiesta Bowl, Ohio State gets the pass interference call against Miami. What do I have yet to hear a Miami fan say in all the years I've done this, all the comments I've seen about that play, thousands of them at this point, I've never heard a Miami fan say, yeah, that was pass interference. We committed
Mhm.
pass interference. Nor if I heard an Ohio State fan, again, thousands of them, say, we got lucky. They threw us a flag. We didn't deserve it. No,
Mhm.
if they were all watching that with unbiased eyes, then the two fan bases would be completely mixed in their
Mhm.
evaluation of that call. But that's not the case.
Mhm. Same thing with the Ohio State Clemson game a couple years ago. It's the exact same thing
Yeah.
with that play. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, even I remember, like the Indiana Penn State game from 2020, which is like the highlight of Indiana, football for the last 25 years or so.
That's
But
it.
I mean, that play, there are still Penn State fans that say that game is not legitimate because you couldn't prove that he scored. I mean, I'm happy that they gave it to him, but like I'm looking at it where they called it good. So you can't overturn it because there wasn't enough to overturn it. So I mean, but yeah, they're gonna not say it. They're gonna say it's not legitimate.
There's a great example that you just gave. That's a great example because for me, I don't think, again, this is me trying to
Mhm.
weed all my bias out of it, but I don't even
Mhm.
know what my bias would be because I don't care about Penn State and I don't care about Indiana. I was just watching a great football game. And I remember just having a very, I didn't leap for joy, nor did I, punch the wall. I didn't care. I just was fascinated by how close, Michael Penix is just, he's parallel to the ground diving, and the dude's pretty tall. So he's like using every quarter inch of length that he has to touch that pylon right about exactly when the football's hitting the ground. And it's like, I don't know what happened. And I don't really care what they rule, but this is fascinating.
Yeah, that I mean, it was so crazy about it is usually it's a penalty or something, like you said,
Yeah.
with like the Saints and the Rams, something like that that should have been called. Some people would say that it should have been called for sure, but like in certain cases with a penalty, but that was just it wasn't a penalty. It was just did he get in or not? And that's so rare. You don't see plays like that very often, and I've never seen it where we're 3 years later and still people on the Penn State side say it wasn't a score. And I mean, I've looked at probably 500 different angles of that. I have to say, I've looked at as many different angles as I can find of it, and I still can't tell. It's like it immediately when it goes out of bounds, it looks like he gets it. I'm just not sure. But I mean, I was glad he got it because, obviously it was cool to see Indiana finally have some type of success, even if for a lot of people it wasn't legitimate. But like you said, that just shows you the bias, though, because of the fact if Penn State fans were looking at that game, and my thing is as well is like I get that you love your team, you want them to keep beating Indiana every year because you're supposed to, but I think that as well you could be like, you know what, we've beat Indiana all these times, and it was a great game, and we didn't get the call to go our way, but no, it's like it don't count, it's not legitimate, but then it's like, but you're biased, right? No, I'm not biased. We won. It's like you shouldn't even been that close of a game. My argument always back on that game is all the guy had to do was go down. James Franklin was screaming, "Don't score, go down," and the dude scored, and it gave Indiana a chance. They had the game.
I believe that
Mathematically, if he
was,
goes
yes,
down, the game was over.
that's right. Cavante Lee, if I remember
Mm-hmm.
correctly. Yes. Yeah, and I'm glad that you came up with that example because the best example I could come up with, and that one actually matches it, if not exceeds it, is, and I try to stay away from Ohio State, Michigan, and come up with better examples because I don't want to plunge us in the middle of that all the time. But it's the 2016 JT Barrett spot. And the Michael Penix play to me is similar to the JT Barrett spot where, and I'm emotionally invested in that call, but I still to this day say, I don't know. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
they got it right or wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was that close. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
When when you talk about that must be the most inexact execution of officiating that has to be done in
Mm-hmm.
sports is the placement of a football after every play. That has to be the most inexact thing. There's a there's a dude and there's 14, 4 guys pulling at him, and he falls, and he just lands, and he puts the ball on the ground, and the refs just kind of back it up somewhere, and they do the best they can. But shoot, every play, that ball spot is probably sometimes off by that much. Sometimes it's off by this much. Sometimes it's especially when they run out of bounds. They're carrying the ball in their hand and they just run out of bounds. Now you want to tell me that an official knows exactly, based on the rules of the game, where that ball crossed the sideline at the time that he landed his foot and all that? No.
Yeah, it's hilarious, and I love when players try to mark it as far ahead as possible to try to fool them. It's like it's unbelievable. And another example of that, and I don't even remember actually at this point which team it was, but Auburn Penn State in that game a few years ago, there was like a 4th and 1 where one of the teams tried to sneak it over, and he got it, but they blew it dead before he crossed over. I think it might have been Penn State or something. I can't remember which team it was, though, but that's the same thing. It's like you blew it dead and they're still going forward. It's like that should have been a first down. I get it. You blow it dead because it's forward progress for it, but they were still pushing them forward. So, I mean, there's tons of plays like that you can't get it always right, but when they don't get it right, or you can tell it should have been a little bit different, like a ball spot or something like that, both fan bases go crazy, especially when it impacts the result for sure.
Great game. Purdue, Tennessee, Liberty Bowl, Music City Bowl, just 2 years ago.
Oh man, that's a great example. I remember that. Oh man, Tennessee. Oh, that was a score. That was a score.
Yeah. Now that's one where I think it was really close, but I do lean Tennessee on that one. I do think that their fans have a legitimate gripe to say that they scored. I'd have to go back and watch it again to remember. The only defense that Purdue has is basically the officials, like to your point, that they do sometimes. They blew it dead too quickly.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, like with the Penn State, Indiana, it's like I can go 50-50 on that one. But with the Purdue, Tennessee, I'm with you. I think Tennessee scored. And that's nothing that, I'm not saying it because it's Purdue. I'm glad Purdue won the game. I thought it was a great game. And, both teams deserve to win. It's one of those for sure. But Tennessee, I did feel like they scored. But like you said, and like I mentioned earlier as well, when they blow it dead, sometimes there's nothing you can do. And the art of blowing it dead, there's not much you can really do about it, but you feel like they should let it play out, though, until the end, instead of blowing it dead before. When they're still moving forward and you blow it dead, it's like, hey, he scored, and then you just blew it dead. It's crazy.
Jeffrey, we have reached the high point of the show, and we will not come anywhere close to this high point in any show at any point that I can imagine. So I was about to recognize Shoelace Sooner's comment here saying, I'm absolutely biased towards OU, but I have to try to have an open mind the best I can, because I said, absolutely, that's phenomenal. That's great. You admit you're biased, but you try to have an open mind. That's a great place to be. But then Shoelace Sooner comes back with this. Hey, football fam, today is a great day. We are closer to football season, and my wife and I got news today that her cancer is gone. This is an amazing day. Appreciate you, Mark.
That's awesome.
Wow. Yes. For people that don't know, Shoelace Sooner, great supporter of us, does a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about. Hopefully at some point you will know about, but much more important than that, yes, his wife has been battling cancer, and wow, that's amazing news. So thank you so much for that, Shoelace Sooner. I'm so grateful for you and your wife. And yes, thank you so much for that and reporting that great news. That's awesome to hear.
For sure. I'm so glad that that's the case. I mean, cancer, I've had tons of family and friends that have passed away from that already that I've known in my life. And it's a terrible thing. No joke. And I'm so glad that she is cancer-free. That's the best.
Shoelace Sooner, our show is dedicated to you and your wife tonight. Thank you so much for reporting that. That was great to hear. I'm glad you could make it tonight to let us all know that. All right, Jeffrey, is there anything else that's on your mind?
I'm trying to think. I mean, 66 days to college football. I mean, all I know is that, just reading, online and for the last few years, talking with you and so many other people about sports, is that you've got people that are really, I guess you would say, nice about, with the sport. And then you got some people that sometimes aren't too nice. And it's like with sports, it's just the entertainment and the fun that we have talking about it and watching the games every single year. And all the players that, work so hard to, for their careers, but also, to put a spectacle on for, all of us watching and, having a great time. It's just, it's awesome. And I enjoy so much coming on here and, talking to you and talking to so many people about sports. And I think that when sports are approached that way, when people are all just having a great time, enjoying it, and it doesn't get, heated, or doesn't get where people are saying, bad things to each other, that's just the best thing. You just can't beat it when it's just like we're having a good time, like with the Tim, with Brian Kelly stuff like that, I love stuff like that. That is the best. But I mean, I guess just looking at it, I can't, again, 66 days, you've got the week 0 games pulled up. Nothing too important for week 0, but you do got Notre Dame, Navy, that you just never know. Navy, sometimes like Army, they can pull an upset, but Will definitely doesn't think that for sure. Notre Dame is going to beat them probably by 30 at least.
What I love about week 0 is I will watch some teams in week 0 that I will never watch the rest of the season. There's no way I will watch them because there's no way that they will have a significant enough of a game to watch because there's just too many good teams playing all the time during the rest of the season. So if we've got the game times there, and so we've got, I'll blow it up a little bit more. So Navy, Notre Dame, and actually Navy, despite Ken Niumatalolo's last season, had a great career at Navy, but his last few seasons pretty rough, and he got fired at the end of the season. But they gave Notre Dame a serious scare last year. They scored a ton of points in the second half to come back and get within 34-32. So you got that game on NBC. And so then, for example, after I watch Notre Dame Navy, I'll sit and watch this UTEP Jacksonville State game on CBS Sportsnet. CBS Sportsnet, those poor folks, I don't know who's watching their games, but this is classic CBS Sportsnet because they show a ton of Mountain West, like usually pretty bad Mountain West games that might be on until 2 a.m. And that's some CBS Sportsnet right there. UTEP and Jacksonville State, by the way, playing their first ever FBS game. Jacksonville State, as they have elevated from FCS play. So I'll get to watch that for like an hour and a half before I guess I'm going to be weighing the UTEP Jacksonville State game against the UMass New Mexico State game that's on ESPN primetime.
Unbelievable.
If I'm ESPN, well, I wouldn't do this if I was ESPN, but if I'm Mark and I had to force ESPN to do this, I'd say, you know what? This is a primetime Saturday night game. Let's get Fowler and Herbstreit out for this UMass New Mexico State game. Let's make them do this game and get revved up for the season.
Yeah, they'll be like, you're going to make us memorize players and coaches we're not even going to have to talk about again.
Yes, you will never have to mention these guys the rest of the season, even on College Game Day when you're doing your quick, 13-second hit on every game.
They barely talk about Indiana on there, so they're not going to talk about them. They're definitely not going to be talking about UMass.
Well, again, we're actually going to have quite the decision to make, and I'm going to have multiple screens going because UMass New Mexico State's on ESPN kicking off at the same time as Ohio against San Diego State, which should actually be a better game on FS1. And then if everyone remembers on opening night, week 0 last year, Vanderbilt put down 56 on Hawaii. And now the Rainbow Warriors have to come back to Nashville to take on Vandy. So all 3 of those games are going to be going on at the same time.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember when Vanderbilt won by that much, though, and there was people thinking that Vanderbilt was actually going to be good, that they were actually going to have a really good team, which I'm not saying they didn't have a good season. They did beat Kentucky and Florida last year, but then they got destroyed by Tennessee. That kind of showed they still weren't very good, but they were a little better.
And then about halftime, or sometime in the second quarter, USC. So if you want to see, a team that we're going to be focused on the rest of the season, obviously as a top 10 team, you're going to go. You're going to try to find the Pac-12 network, or you're just going to give up and say, "I've never had it, never will," kind of thing. So we'll just keep the track of the score. But San Jose State taking on USC at the Coliseum, and then the nightcap on CBS Sportsnet, FIU and Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, that's the type game where it's like, if it's good, we'll stay up till midnight to watch, but if it's not, we're hitting the hay early, you know?
Well, that's you, Jeffrey. I'm staying up regardless.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there. I mean, sometimes if it's, I sometimes stay up and watch, but it's got to be a really good game, though, because I don't want to pay for it while watching a game that's a blowout. I want to earn that being tired, watching a good game.
Well, yeah, this is a good point. You are wise beyond your years, Jeffrey. I was not nearly as smart as you at your age, because, I would just gut out the most ridiculously boring games at 1:30 and 2:00 in the morning. But yeah, get your rest, wake up refreshed, be ready for the next day, rather than taking in that 49-13 FIU Louisiana Tech game down to the last minute. I enjoy going through the schedule and seeing the TV times and trying to map out in my mind which games I'm going to prioritize.
Yeah, I agree with you on like the fact that, you don't usually turn on CBS Sports Network, though. But I sometimes, though, during the season, if there's a lot of games on,
yeah,
sometimes every game in that window is relatively not close, like it's a blowout. And then, like, for a perfect example of last season, you had UTSA and Houston on CBS Sports Network, and that game was a thriller. I was like, oh man, you had Clayton Tune flipping over in the end zone, and he beat Frank Harris. And tough loss for them losing Zachary Franklin. That was tough for sure for UTSA, but that was a great game. So it seems like sometimes CBS Sports Network has like the good, Conference USA games, even though it's tough that Houston's out in the Big 12. That hurts. But you have, games like that. But FS1 usually gets the better Mountain West games, like Boise. They get, over on FS1. But like you said, CBS Sports Network usually gets the bad Mountain West games, the bad Sun Belt games most of the time. But Conference USA, American, they've had some good ones. But it seems like that's going to dwindle a bit.
Yeah. To your point, there's 3 or 4 times a season that I experience the same thing. I've got the Big Ten, whatever the marquee game, that particular window at 3:30, and the SEC game, and they're all kind of like, that one's 31-10, and this one's 35-7, and no good games. And then I'll see, like, on the bottom line, I'll see, Houston 28, Memphis 27. I'll be like, where's that? Oh, it's on ESPNU. Let's check that out for the last, and I'll get excited because I'll be like, oh, there's a game going on to the wire. Let's check this out.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I don't know why more people don't do that, because like I have this problem with family all the time. Like last year you had the Iron Bowl. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. We want to watch Alabama curve stop Auburn, but the game's over already. Let's flip over to Oregon State. The Beavers are coming back. Gotta watch that. That's what I want to do. I want to watch that. I know Alabama's got the game.
I get the point. It's the Iron Bowl, but when it's 45-13 in the fourth quarter, it ceases to be. We'll hope it's a good game next year. Let's watch some. Yeah. Exactly.
We're like Auburn fans. We're hoping it'll be a good game next year. Alabama's like, let's just keep blowing them out. Exactly. It's crazy for sure. But yeah, I love that though. I love sometimes when there's really good games in with the smaller teams, and I love flipping those games on. And sometimes I'll have a game on though, like you said, ESPNU, ESPN News, CBS Sports Network, which is ironic that more people have that than the Pac-12 network. I mean, like the Pac-12, you want to make money, you want to succeed, put your network on more, stations, cable companies, streaming service, whatever. That would be smart. I'm not trying to tell you how to run things because I don't know how to do anything like that. But I don't have the Pac-12 network, but I got ESPN News. That should tell you everything.
Good stuff. Well, Jeffrey, appreciate you being here. I'm going to move on. I've got about 4 calls lined up here.
For sure. Definitely can't wait to talk to you again soon. This football season is going to be right around the corner. It's crazy, but I had a lot of fun talking to you tonight about the unbiased stuff and some of these obscure games that we're going to be looking forward to in week 0. Should be awesome. And definitely talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Have a good night.
You too.
Before we take our next call, I want to hit some of these super chats. Appreciate all of you contributing. And again, the highlight of the night, we already know what it is. This is just, wow. It's phenomenal. Shoelace Sooner, his wife is cancer-free, got the report. And that is just phenomenal news. Thank you, John, for your contribution and acknowledgement and in joining in the celebration there. Nick says it's definitely more difficult to be an Ohio State fan and be unbiased. That fan base has a reputation of really believing what they deposit into the toilet doesn't stink. Their delusion is tangible and cultish. Okay, again, Nick, sorry, you're wrong. Not that you're wrong about what you stated about Ohio State fans, but number one, that you stated it in such a way that just all Ohio State fans are that way. Well, that's not true. That's ridiculous to state that about any fan base, number one. Number two, I got to think that I have as much contact with about as many fans as just about anyone in a way that we have conversations. And you know what? I've come to this conclusion. All fan bases are the same. They have reasonable, logical people. They have overly emotional, sensitive people. They have delusional people. They have people that are way too optimistic, way too hopeful, that have the viewpoint that their team's always doing the right thing, always going to win, that their coach is the best. They have pessimistic, overly pessimistic, negative fans that are never pleased. Things are never right. So I appreciate your comment, Nick. Obviously, you are biased as an Ohio State hater, and that's fine. That's great. And you are welcome to leave your comments here as long as you're not being insulting. And even though that is a very insulting comment, it certainly stays within the guidelines of what we promote here at the Voice of College Football. So, Nick, if you have done one thing here tonight, I applaud you for this. You have been able to throw down the most insulting, disgusting comment. You've used the words toilet, stink, cultish, and you have still stayed within the boundaries of what I consider to be appropriate trash talking. That is trash talking at its finest. So, Nick, thank you so much for that. None of it's true. None of it's factual, but it is trash talking. That is trash talking at its finest that I don't take part in, but we welcome here at the Voice of College Football. It's just not my style. All right. We will take our calls here in just a second. I want to get through these super chats. Jason commenting to Shoelace Sooner. Jason, thank you so much for your contribution. That's awesome, my friend. I'm glad she is cancer-free now. Excuse me. My prayers for both of you, hoping it stays away. My dad also has liver cancer. So, Jason, thank you so much for your comment to Shoelace Sooner. Yes, we rejoice with him. At the same time, Jason, we feel horrible for your situation with your dad. My dad passed away with prostate cancer, so I certainly understand your pain. And as Jeffrey commented, he's had family members and people close to him pass away due to cancer. It's a horrible, horrible thing that can't be overstated in any way. So, Jason, our thoughts and prayers are with you. And for me personally, when I say my prayers are with you, that's what I mean. I don't mean that just in some kind of wishful sort of way, but I will be praying for your father. So, Jason, thank you so much for that. Shoelace Sooner. Wow. Thanks, Mark. I'm full go on our project. We have been working together. No more delays. That is certainly not the important thing. That's great to hear, Shoelace Sooner. But man, bask in the news right there, and certainly continue to do all the great things and to be a great husband and partner for your wife. Thank you so much for that. And Larry, we appreciate Larry being here. Larry, one of our great, knowledgeable college football fans. Worst thing is biased commentary. Brock Heward. Now, Larry, I'm sure, because I know Larry is a extremely knowledgeable and reasonable college football fan, has reason to say that about Brock Heward. My estimation, Brock Heward is one of the very best in the business. I think he's phenomenal. He is one of my favorite color commentators. Would love to get him on here. Should probably try to get him on here. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for the contributions. Appreciate that. Let's go to our next call. We've got our buddy Christopher on the line. Hello,
Mark.
sir.
How are you?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
Well, good. Was it you were saying that Michael Penix's touchdown was questionable? Was that kind of? Well, you know what? I have a lot of free time, but anyway, I froze the screen and to get what I thought was like a unbiased opinion on what I thought it did, and what it looked like is the tip of the football hit the pylon before his knee. I guess it was his knee. It's been long enough ago now. I don't remember, but I think it was actually a touchdown by the rule of the law. I know it didn't cross the goal line, but I think the ball actually touched and I think they probably reviewed it. So I don't know if that's really a questionable call, except for the fact he was almost out, his knee almost hit the ground, I think. It was like whether he hit the knee before the ball, but I think he actually touched the pylon. It was pretty clear on the replay.
So that game happened in 2020, so it's been 2.5 years since I saw that game. And I've not gone back that play about 48 times the week after that.
Well, watching it live, you couldn't really tell. It was. I'm sorry.
Let me finish my statement.
Yeah.
So the thing that I remember is not necessarily that Michael Penix's knee hit the ground before the ball hit the pylon. It's that the football and again, it's been so long since I've seen it, whether the football extended, hit out of bounds, or on the line, which would have been out of bounds before it hit the pylon. I thought that was more what was in question there.
Well, I don't know. I was just trying to clear it up a little bit. When I was able to freeze it, because I was able to freeze it on my screen. Because, like I said, I couldn't tell watching it. Everything happened so fast on the. You really can't tell watching it, but it looked like I
couldn't even tell watching the replays.
Well, just from the angle that I had, and like I said, I froze it on the screen. It did look to me like and it was real close, by the way. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, definitely, but yeah. It looked like it was as close as it could be without not actually counting, but still, it looked to me like he did actually touch the point of the football hit the pylon before his knee hit the ground. So yeah, I think he did score.
Okay.
But it was real close, though. I mean, it wasn't like really clear. But I just wanted to clear it up, so like people think it was a questionable call. I mean, it was questionable as far as whether it should have counted, I guess. But the replay to me seemed to confirm that it was at least a good, not to reverse it maybe.
Well, they called it a touchdown on the field. So you're saying that based on your observation, it was actually confirmed.
I had a pretty good angle on it. I mean, like I said,
they obviously didn't have enough evidence to overturn it.
Well, I don't think they should have, is what I'm trying to tell you.
But, I know.
Okay. And I'm not like pro Indiana, anti Penn State. It looked to me like he actually did. The point of the football, it did hit the pylon, and it was before anything. I think it was before his knee hit the ground, is what I think it was, before he was down. So I think it was actually a touchdown. But it was real close, though. It was very, out of bounds, I think, because he was also on the sideline. But the point of the football did touch the pylon. It was really close, though, real close. Almost so close you couldn't really tell. So, I mean, it still might be disputed, but I don't know that it was a call that you could necessarily say wasn't.
Okay, I'm watching it right now. Yeah. Again, I don't know. I think the issue was not necessarily his body, it was the football touching out of bounds. Like if he's got the ball and let's see, I'm watching like it, yes, he's dragging the ball like, and it touches the pylon, but it also touches the white out of, man, see, I actually think they got it wrong now that I've watched it.
Well,
he's got the ball. He hit the white. It looks like the ball hit out of bounds. It hit the. I wish I could show this, but you know what? I actually, for the first time, my recollection of this was I was like just throwing up my hands saying, I have no idea. Okay. But I've only watched it twice here, and I think they got it wrong.
No, I mean, it was close enough that it definitely wasn't like they could have called it the other way too and maybe had a, good legitimate point to it. But I didn't think that it was like so bad to where it was like, no, he didn't. I mean, I actually kind of thought he did.
I don't know, Chris.
No, that's okay. I mean, everybody has a right.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying anybody's wrong or I'm right. I'm just saying based on my observation here.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the back end of the football touched before the front end hit the. So I don't know if that matters. I mean, the back end.
Well, it's out of bounds. That's the problem.
Okay, well then maybe he was out then. I don't know, but
yes, I know that I'd have to pull up the rule book, but I'm assuming you can't touch the football on the ground out of bounds. Maybe you can. Because that's not something people normally would do. A player would normally not like hold the ball and hit the out of bounds.
It's out of bounds, but yeah, I don't think so either. But yeah, it was a judgment call, definitely. It wasn't really conclusive to one side of it, but
yeah,
it looked
fascinating.
To me, the point of the football, I think, did hit the front of the pylon, so I think it was at the very least he did what he had to do to score. But whether it was legal as far as I don't know what the rule is on that. So I can't like say, because I don't know the rules. So,
well, fortunately, it didn't change any like championship or anything like that.
That wasn't like a fourth down, was it? I don't really remember. Was it 4th and goal? Like my memory isn't as good as it used to be.
Oh, yeah. I believe it was.
Yeah, it was like a kind of a make or break situation.
Yes.
Well, anyway, just from the angle that they showed on replay, because I wanted to kind of know for myself. It looked to me like the tip of the football touched the front of the pylon. So before the back of the football hit the back of so to me, it looked like it was a score, but I just thought that I would share that.
Yeah. They were down 35-34. It was a 2-point conversion.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Well, I thought he scored, but I might be wrong.
All right, Christopher, anything else?
Well, yeah, I was going to, then there was that play, and, we talk about, Texas Christian, they lost to Kansas State. Well, they did, but I know there was at least one play in overtime that if they would have given him credit for, I think it would have, I don't remember what I think it was for touchdown as well. I think it would have given Kansas the win.
Max Duggan.
Well, the ball went, I mean, it looked to me from the angle that they showed, it looked like they first stopped the running back, and then when he reached the ball over, it looked like it. So, I mean, yeah, it's like kind of like depends on when the whistle blew sort of thing. So I don't know how I guess they really couldn't overturn it, but it was one of those things where, I don't know. No, it wasn't Max Duggan. The question was whether they should have run the football in that situation, but the running back himself, I think, actually extended his arm across the goal line after his forward momentum was. So I mean, I actually kind of halfway agreed with that call, because it's like it was after his forward, and the angle was a little questionable too. It wasn't directly over, but it did kind of look like he crossed the goal line before they called the play dead. That would have changed the result from a loss to a win, which I don't know if it didn't really impact anything other than just the championship itself. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I'm looking at I remember that play happened, but I don't recall the circumstances.
It was the last play of the game. It was what decided the outcome. It was the last play of the game. The arm itself, or I think it was, maybe it's the next to last. Anyway, rather than Duggan maybe he handed it to the running back, and he didn't be able to get his arm across, but he did. But they didn't. I guess either they thought the momentum, or maybe it was he didn't cross the goal. I don't really know, but it's changed. If they would have called it a touchdown, obviously that would have changed the result from a loss to a win.
play of the game was a field goal to end the game
by Kansas State.
Yes. So
Well,
it must have been.
I'm talking about maybe it was the series leading up to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't really change anything because Texas Christian still, but it would have maybe in a BCS type situation, it would have maybe had an impact though.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
If all you care about is the playoff, it didn't change anything. But if you care about the Big 12 championship, then of course it did matter.
Do you have any regarding, because this actually is kind of an important moving forward, I think. There was disputes about, I guess probably because of the way Texas Christian was beaten in the championship game, whether or not that, I don't know if it's whether they shouldn't have been in the playoff, but it was maybe more about whether or not Alabama should have been maybe included. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, my thought is that if you're going by wins and losses, Texas Christian earned the spot.
Yeah.
However, was Alabama a better football team? I think so.
Probably, yeah. I don't even doubt that either, really. But I guess my question would be, because you know what it kind of boils down to? It's like handicapping, because isn't that kind of what Vegas does, is handicap? So it's really kind of what they're debating is whether or not they shouldn't handicap the championship then, isn't it? Isn't that kind of what they're saying? Whether they should be handicapped to where maybe a team like Alabama, even if they've maybe might get it.
What Nick Saban is apparently saying is that shouldn't Vegas odds be telling us who the better teams are?
Right. Well, that's the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's stupid.
Oh, you don't like that?
No. I'm shocked that Nick Saban would suggest that. Like, I would have loved to have been or seen the reporter that would have stood up, let's say 5 years ago, and say, I think we should determine playoff teams based on Vegas odds. What do you think of that, Coach? He would have torn that guy to shreds.
I actually don't think it's a terrible idea. You want to know because I think what it would do, I mean, it might not be the best, in all fairness. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what betting has to do with the results, but as far as like maybe advancing a team like Alabama, you know, especially if the end result would be maybe a closer title game, if that's what it would do. I mean, maybe that's not the worst idea.
Well, I'm not discounting Vegas. Vegas knows what it's doing. There's a reason why there are all the fancy hotels in Vegas. They make a ton of money ripping people off because they're smarter than the rest of us.
Yeah. They know a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, they've crunched the numbers. There's no way that anyone or enough people can stay ahead of them. And plus, the betting, the whole process of betting is tilted toward them anyway. They're already taking 10% of your money, even if you win. You know, so the payouts are less than what they're taking in. So they've tilted the equation in their favor. But if Ohio State and Michigan would not have played the last 2 seasons, Vegas told us that Ohio State was more than a touchdown better than Michigan both seasons.
Oh, I didn't know that. So they actually kind of knew.
Well, no, they didn't know. Michigan won.
Oh, I see. Oh, I thought you meant okay, I understand.
So I do get the point. It's not like I think it's completely invalid, but I just would not want to rely on Vegas to tell us which team should be in the playoffs.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we had that title game that was so, I guess, lopsided to where kind of made me wonder a little bit about what might have contributed to that because, you know, I don't think Michigan tanked. I don't think that they didn't have motivation or, I mean, I don't know how anybody can justify that. I know they said, was it Blake Cornum or whoever? Oh, they were, okay, shorthanded, but I don't even know if that really explains the fact that, I mean, does one player make that big of a difference to where, you know, I mean, maybe in that situation, sure, but I would think, you know, it's a team sport. I mean, you should have somebody else that can fill in without, I know, for example, when Oklahoma played Florida, I think was it DeMar? I can't remember who it was. Chris, what's his name? He filled in for DeMarco Murray, I believe. And Oklahoma ended up losing, but I don't know that they blamed it on the fact that DeMarco Murray wasn't available, did they? The year that they played Florida, if you remember that season.
Oh, I remember that season in that game, but you're rattling the cobwebs. I did not recall about DeMarco Murray not playing in the BCS championship game.
He wasn't available, I don't think, but they had his name is Chris something. Anyway, he filled in and thought he did all right. Maybe he didn't do as well. I mean, I can understand that part, but I don't know if that you can blame the loss on that, but maybe you can. I don't know. Maybe that's enough of a switch that it makes a big difference. Maybe it kind of like cascades or something to where now nobody's quite sure what to do. Or I think there was wasn't right before halftime, didn't there have I think Oklahoma had to settle for a field goal or something. I don't really remember. There was in that game, I think Florida ended up winning it pretty easily, but I think right before halftime, Oklahoma was Chris Brown, I think was his name anyway. They weren't able to score, I don't think, and so it kind of impacted maybe not having Chris Brown. They didn't have the right player, I guess, in there to maybe make the difference is kind of what people might say about it. I don't know if you remember that.
Vaguely, I remember that.
Just a little bit. Well, I remember watching it and kind of wondering if that wasn't kind of if you don't have the best player in the game at the best position in the championship game, I can see how that would change the outcome a little bit.
So again, what is your connection between that game and what the playoff selection should be?
I mean, just for example, I mean, I keep hearing comments about that maybe Michigan was looking past. I mean, and maybe they were. I don't know, but I think at some point you just got to kind of swallow your pride and say, hey, wasn't our day or something. So I don't know that you can really say, well, just because Texas Christian got their lunch handed to them in the championship game, that somehow means that the Fiesta Bowl itself didn't really have an impact on the way it, I don't see, you can have it both ways. It's kind of what I'm trying to say. Either Texas Christian deserved to be there or they didn't. And if they didn't, why were they, sort of thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think they earned the spot. I don't think that they were one of the 4 best teams in the country, and I thought that even before they got demolished by Georgia. But there's a difference between earning it and actually being that good. So, for example, in 2019, if you recall, LSU, Clemson, and Ohio State were all undefeated, so they were shoo-ins for the playoff. The 4th spot went to an Oklahoma team that had 1 loss. They won the Big 12 championship, and I believed that they were the right choice. They earned it. But people asked me, are they the 4th best team in the country? And I said, absolutely not. Alabama's the 4th best team in the country.
Okay.
And then Oklahoma got demolished, gave up 49 points, 7 touchdowns in the first half against LSU. And obviously LSU and Alabama played a 46-41 game.
No, I mean, I guess I'm not trying to fix anything or change the result or trying to make it because I know Oklahoma is still pretty good. And they have Carly Murray that year. Anyway.
Yes.
I mean,
Jalen Hurts. Yeah, I got you.
I don't remember if they did. I'm trying to figure it out. But anyway, that's as good a quarterback as I think they could have hoped for. I don't know. And maybe it was their defense was sort of suspect. I think I remember some people saying that it was, I mean, that was probably part of it too. But to say that they didn't deserve to be there, though, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know. I don't like it when people take one result and just grab onto it. And that just shows that they shouldn't have been there in the first place, sort of thing. I mean, I was embarrassed, I guess, because I kind of like TCU. I mean, I don't have any connection to them, but, I know a little bit about what kind of program they run there. And I was hoping it was actually going to be, tight game that maybe even came down to the wire. But so when it wasn't that way, it was a disappointment. But, I don't know that we can, I still think you have to kind of give them some credit just for even getting there.
Here's the thing about the Vegas lines, and then we'll move on to another call, and I'll let you close out the call with whatever you want to finish with. Here's the thing about the Vegas lines is that let's say Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State all went 10-2 this year. They all lost 2 games.
Sure.
Vegas would still favor those 3 teams over everyone in the country.
I see.
There has to be a lot that's got to change before they're going to move off of those 3 teams beating everyone else.
How about the idea of advancing it? Maybe for example, in the case of Texas Christian, since they weren't quite up to where they needed to be. I mean, that was obvious. I mean, nobody can really say that they were. I mean, obviously they weren't quite where they needed to be, or they wouldn't have got beaten so bad. Maybe make a stipulation. I mean, I don't know that it would be such a huge issue. Maybe not just to have only 1 loss or whatever, but maybe even have to win that game against Kansas State. I think maybe that would be a better way to limit maybe who goes. What do you think of that?
Oh, that TCU needed to win the conference championship game.
To advance. You don't think that's a good idea?
Oh, I think it's a great idea that teams should have to win their conference to go to the playoffs, but that's not a criteria. It's only one of many criteria.
Well, I'm just saying in terms of maybe setting a bar, because I mean, if we want to set it as high as we can, that would be a good way to limit maybe who could go, maybe limit it to the people that actually have that
see.
for their resume.
We've already had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 teams not win conference championships and go to the playoffs.
Yeah, but they were really good teams, though. I mean, I don't know that any of them. You can't necessarily say that any of them didn't qualify, or can you? I know Ohio State went one season, and I don't remember how it ended up. But
well, now it's 2 seasons Ohio State's been a non-champion and gone to the playoffs.
There was another one. I don't remember the other one.
2016 and last season.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. Well, they lost to Michigan, but anyway, I guess I don't know that there's an issue with the playoffs, but actually, I kind of think Nick Saban has a good point. I mean, I think it would have made for a better, maybe a better tie. I think there's a good chance the way that Alabama dominated Kansas State, what was it, 45-20? I think there's a good chance that they could have advanced and maybe, at least given Georgia, a run for their money, sort of thing.
Sure.
So I'm not going to say that he's right about every part of it, but I don't know that that's such a bad idea, really. If the idea is to make sure that the 4 best teams, maybe that's a good way to pick them out, if that's what you want.
I have Vegas determine that.
No, well, it's not necessarily. I think it's just called handicapping. I think it's like what they use at like the horse races. They put
it's the folks in Vegas.
They put the best horses at the front, and then they put the worst ones at the back. I mean, that's just what they do. I don't know if there's a good reason for it, but that's what they do. I mean, it's still the same. They're all together. I mean, I don't think it really changes anything, but.
If we looked at every Vegas line from last season, how many games do you think? What do you think their percentage correct is?
Oh, I have no idea. I wouldn't know. I have no idea.
It's about 70%.
It's only, you don't think it's higher than that?
Not much.
Really? Well, anyway, I mean, like I said, I think he's just basically arguing for that, sort of thing. And that they do use that same model in other sports. So it's not like he's throwing something out there that has no, like NASCAR. I mean, that's how they determine who's at the pole, the best qualifying time. So
I mean, no. Those are 2 different things. The best qualifying time, they actually went out there and earned that qualifying time. They raced. Well, they didn't race. They had a qualifying lap earlier that weekend to determine where they were going to start.
Right.
That's not having Vegas determine where the cars start.
Well, I kind of handicapped. I don't know if you saw it or not, where I handicapped this year, and I think Ohio State's right at the top. And it's not because I want to make sure that's just where they are. So if somebody wants to bet on a team this year, a good team to bet on is Ohio State. And just throw that out there, but that's a good team for somebody to want to bet on if they want to see somebody win. That's a pretty good bet right there. It just is. I mean, I can't really say much about it. I mean, and then the other 2 would be Alabama and Tennessee are 2 good ones to throw your money on. In Michigan.
Okay. Everyone got your betting advice from Christopher tonight.
Well, I mean, that's
I'm going to take some other calls. Do you have anything else to say?
No, sir.
All right. Well, thanks for calling.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Nick says Joel Klatt lost credibility by not pushing back on Nick Saban when he said that betting line nonsense is a reason for Bama to get into the playoffs. Do on-the-field results not matter now? Yeah, I am just flabbergasted that Nick Saban would suggest that. That just, to me, I've been watching Nick Saban since, he was an assistant coach with the Cleveland Browns back in the early 1990s. And then he got the job, of course, at Michigan State in replacing George Perlis, right? And this is so out of character for him to suggest something like this, except for the fact that his team would always get selected to the playoffs. All right. Next up here, the Voice of College Football, Erica's here.
Hello. How's it going?
Hi, Erica. Thank you for waiting.
No worries. So I have taken the liberty of making a small list here, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on some things.
Okay.
So do you think it's harder to be unbiased about your team if they're more successful than other teams.
Ooh, that's a great question.
So do you think, like, in Ohio State, like, as a fan base, I'm not making assumptions about anybody. Some fans, because as you say, all fan bases have levels of people who are homers and then people who are unbiased, right? Most of them are probably somewhere in between, in my estimation. So do you think that, like, an Ohio State fan base would have a harder time being unbiased versus somebody who's less successful?
Yes. That's a great point that you just brought up. I never thought of it quite that way. I've somewhat thought of it that way because, so Erica, take what I do, for example. Believe it or not, there have been many times, and I've actually stated this on here, that I wish I wasn't an Ohio State fan. I wish I was a Texas Tech fan, let's say, because they're never talked about. They're never talked about in regards to competing for championships. They don't compete for championships. I would just go along my merry way, host a college football show, and root for my Texas Tech 7-5 team that nobody cared about. But my team's like always in the thick of things. So they're always in the thick of the conversation, the discussion, the championship games, and all of that. So I have to be in the midst of these conversations, but do my best to take my fandom out of it.
Right. And you do, I think, in my opinion, you do a good job of it. I've seen people commenting that, or, saying on Twitter and sometimes in the chat that you're too, you're biased, or I think you do a darn good job. So congratulations to you.
I think you hit on a great point there, because if you're a Illinois fan, you don't have an expectation for playing for championships. So you love your team. You're a college football fan. Of course, you want them to do well. You hope that you'll just have this miracle season, but it just never happens. And you go from being 8-4 one year to 5-7 to 4-8 to 6-6. The games you play just, unfortunately, on a large scale, they don't matter. I'm not saying they don't matter. Of course they matter to those fans, but they don't shape championships. So I can tell you from personal experience as an Ohio State fan, and I'm sure this holds true for other fans of elite teams, that again, if you're rooting for a team that's not even in the conversation, then you don't mind, if an Illinois fan sees that they're ranked in the top 25 in the preseason, they jump for joy. They're never ranked in the top 25 in the preseason. So they'd be like, this is awesome. This is amazing. True. Ohio State fans actually are disgruntled being ranked number 2 or number 3 in the country.
Right.
Because there's a mentality that it irks them that we want to be the best. We should be considered the best. Oh, we're considered the second or the third best. Well, that's not good enough.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comment too. I mean, and then you have someone like me who's a fan of Iowa. I would dare to say that, I want to win a championship. You know how I feel. I'm very critical, which is another point I'm going to ask about in a minute. But I am very critical of my team. You've heard my comments both in Corey's chat and on his show and on your shows about how I felt about the offense and all this. And I'm not going to go there tonight, but when I see that we're ranked preseason, like depending on where that ranking is, I don't necessarily jump for joy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy about it, but I'm not like, oh my God, look at that. Because I mean, it's not super unusual that we're ranked.
Yeah. You're somewhere in the middle.
Right. So, I mean, and I don't get, like I said, I'm just like, oh, that's nice. Maybe we'll get some positive press off of it. That's just my reaction to it. But the next question I have on my list, do you think it's popular to be biased? And the reason I'm asking that question is because, I mean, you just have to look at the chat. It's obvious who's a fan of who. There's a lot of back and forth and, trash talking that happens. And that's not necessarily negative. I think that that's how this sport works and how college athletics works. I mean, the same thing happens with basketball and stuff like that on the college level. So it's not unique to football. But do you think it's kind of become popular that people are homers or are biased?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
There's another yes, because I'll take again our little show here for an example. Our channels and show could be more popular if I would be more bias. And if I was in people's faces and I was some big homer, then I would have Ohio State fans. And I think I have the support of Ohio State fans, but I also have a lot of comments from Ohio State fans that think I recognize that I'm trying to be unbiased. So they think I take it to the other extreme. And I'm kind of hard on Ohio State sometimes because I'm trying to overcompensate. I've had that criticism of me, and I get it that I'm trying to prove that I'm unbiased, so I'm sway it too far to the other side. So yes, and I think that there are a lot of people out there that make opinions and statements just to rile people up.
Oh, that's 100% true. I mean, that's what Twitter is. It's all people making extreme statements, whatever the topic is, whether it be college football, politics, whatever you want. People are making extreme topics to get people fired up and boost their page views and their social media and all this, their followers, their number of followers. I think it's very, in fashion to be biased, regardless what topic you're talking about, because that does a lot for your clicks and views, and number of followers. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think it's a shame. I think that it's gotten to a point where, and this leads me to my last question I've got in my list. I'm trying to keep it short because I know you have a lot of people waiting.
No, that's okay, Erica. Can I make one other point about that?
Yeah.
Thank you. That the only thing I can promise on here is that I will be prepared and that I will give my perspective based on what I believe the facts are showing us. I will just tell what is my version of the truth, which sometimes is the actual truth, and sometimes it's just my perspective. It's not the truth. It's not a right versus wrong situation. It's just a perspective. Sometimes there is right and wrong, but sometimes there is just perspective and opinion, and it will always be my truthful opinion. So I'm not either on one end of the spectrum trying to say all the right things so everybody likes me, but I'm also not on the other end of the spectrum where I'm just saying outlandish things to get people riled up and pissed off at me.
Right.
And that's why sometimes my opinion riles people up, but sometimes my opinion is very vanilla and people are like, well, that was kind of boring. Well, that's just how I see it. So it's not always going to be some kind of controversial opinion.
Right. No, and I agree. I mean, I think you do a good job of just saying it how you see it, like you just stated. I think you do a great job of that. And I think a lot of people, and this could be applied to so many things besides college football. I think so many people make the mistake that their opinion is a fact.
Oh, I hate when I see that. I know that this has become a, what word am I looking for? Not a cliche. It's become kind of a popular trend.
Yeah.
Is for people when they're stating an opinion, they'll put facts.
Oh.
That really annoys me.
Oh
because it's not a fact. It's your opinion.
The only thing in college football that are really facts is, okay, this team beat this team. The score was X to Y. The quarterback had threw this many yards. You can't argue numbers. Numbers are numbers. That is what it is, as far as college football, at least. But when people, like you said, they state an opinion that's maybe controversial or something, get people riled up, and then they put the facts thing. Oh, dear God. I hate
that drives me crazy.
I hate, but I mean, again, this is, bigger than football. This is just our society is headed in a certain direction, which I'm not going to get into it. But I think we think, in some ways, we think similarly about where things are headed in general, not just college football, because you are so right. And the last thing, too, to go on the other side of the spectrum. So, as you know, I'm quite critical of Iowa's offense. And even when they were doing decently, I was still like, they could do better. Because I'm a weird Iowa fan who thinks that maybe one day, not with Kirk, probably, like definitely not with Kirk, if we got the right coach when Kirk retires, whenever that might be, who knows? Weird things have happened. Maybe we win a championship. People forget that we have won one. And I don't bring it up much because it was last century. I'm not going to obsess about something that was last century like some fan bases do. So, and I'm not going to mention any, but I have a few in mind who do that. So, yeah, people think that I'm overcritical because I'm like, well, if we improve, we have such potential because, our defense and special teams, their success, in my opinion, is, you can't argue that. Iowa is known for defense. Look at the numbers. This goes back to what is a fact and what isn't. If you look at the numbers, that is the truth, that they are an elite defense. And people will say all day long, oh, that's because they play a weak schedule, whatever. I mean, maybe there's some truth to that, maybe not. If you look at the Ohio State game, yeah, the score, that was a flipping embarrassment for us. But if you remember, some stops were made by our defense against the Ohio State quarterback. And we held them to less yards than they're used to getting. So that's a statement about Iowa's defense. So, but.
Yeah, that's a great example of if you just see the final score, then you really have no idea how that score was arrived at, and that Iowa's defense played an exceptional game. And that seems ridiculous that a team can give up 54 points, but their defense can still play an exceptional game. But that's exactly what happened.
Right.
You would have to watch the game.
Right. Yeah, or read the stat sheet at the very least.
Yeah, that too.
Oh. And again, stats you can't argue. You can't argue this. You can't say someone got 500 yards. No, they didn't. That's not up for discussion or debate. That's a fact. That's a statistic that you can't disprove. It happened, Yeah.
You can bring context to the statistics.
True.
Maybe Cade McNamara is going to go 18 for 35 his first game, but they're going to have 8 dropped passes. So you can say, right, well, he had a subpar game statistically, but they did drop 8 passes.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Well, it goes back against the Ohio State example I cited. If you look at just the box score, yeah, Iowa did horrible, but that's not the full picture, I guess, is my point. But the original question I did have, though, was how about those of us like me who are very critical, who always want more, who do one day want to win a national championship? And a lot of people laugh at me when I say that. But I think if we had the right personnel, if we had a different head coach, and I'm not saying it's happening tomorrow, but maybe 20 years or something, 15, 20 years, it's possible. It's not like Iowa's, some bottom of the barrel team in general. Yeah, the offense has sucked, but I've also said to people that this is not a typical Iowa offense that we've been playing the last few years. We're not a powerhouse, but we're usually somewhere average.
Yeah, and especially in this changing landscape with the NIL, it all depends on how Iowa and other schools approach that. There's also a 12-team playoff, and you may have heard Corey and I somewhat disagree. And here's another example. Corey and I disagreed, but I don't believe that he had an invalid point. Sometimes I believe in a disagreement, the other side just has no idea what they're talking about.
Right. It's like, where did you come up with that?
Yes. But in this, he and his logic is very reasonable that we're going to a 12-team playoff. Therefore, Iowa has more opportunities, just like everybody else. There are going to be more opportunities to win a national championship.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes total sense. Yeah. My counterpoint, though, is that if a team can put a season together like TCU did this past year, or Iowa did in 2015, where they came within inches of going to the playoff, then in the old model of a 14 playoff, then suddenly you're thrust into a semifinal. Even if you're not the best, one of the 4 best teams in the country, if you just had the right schedule and you had a really good team, of course, but things broke in the right direction, you show up in a semifinal game and suddenly you're 2 games away from winning the national championship and only 1 game away from playing for the national championship, as opposed to what we're going forward into is if you don't win the Big Ten championship, you've got to win 4 games. And even if you win a conference championship, if you win the Big Ten, you've got to win 3 games to win the entire thing. And that's a lot to ask.
Right. So we know how people feel about homers. How do you think people, for those of us, like I said, who are critical, I feel like we also get a lot of garbage thrown at us. Fan bases, for those homers those people who are homers, they're like, oh, how, like, for example, in my case, how can you say that, Kirk maybe should be let go? Why are you, saying that, whatever? And I'm like, because I don't pray to him like he's a deity. He's not perfect. No one is, So I think there's also something to be said about the other side of the spectrum, those of us who are critical of our teams.
I am very respectful of Kirk Ferentz's knowledge, his accomplishments, what appears to be his integrity. I don't know the man, of course, but his integrity, both running a football program and off the field, away from the program. But I am sorely disappointed, certainly not as much as you are, because I'm not emotionally invested, but as a football commentator, analyst, in how he has handled this relationship with his son and the offense. Because there was a point in time in which I ranked Kirk Ferentz as a top 10 coach in college football, but no longer can do that because he has allowed this situation to get in the way of him properly managing. He's not running a hardware store down the street where he can say, you know what, I'll put my son in charge. And even if he screws it up, and it's only going to affect my family, and we're only going to make 50% of what we would have made. No, he's the most popular and most important person from a public standpoint in the state of Iowa.
Right.
He's the highest paid. Fans and alumni are counting on him to make the best decisions to run a successful football program, and he has allowed his family connections to get in the way.
Right. Right. And yeah, I'm very disappointed in that. But believe it or not, although most of the fan base at this point has come to the same conclusion that we have, that he's disappointed us and he has no business running it the way he did, and Brian should have been let go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're far and few between, but there are still some fans who are like, well, whatever, it's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. But there are still those fans who are such homers to kind of, go the full circle. There are those fans who are such homers that they just excuse it. And I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I don't exactly either. We also live in a society where like all the check boxes have to be marked, meaning you can't say that this coach is really good at these things and has done a nice job in these areas, but he's unsuccessful in these areas and he's got a blind spot here. It's like you have to be either or. Like everybody's either great or they're horrible. There's no just balance of an objective evaluation of somebody doing their job, which is mostly going to be both good and bad.
Right. And I mean, that reminds me of a conversation that I was having on an Iowa message board. And I'm sorry I keep talking about Iowa, but I'm obviously a fan of Iowa. And I know their program best, So we were having a discussion about who the next head coach should be, right? And a lot of people were saying, it was a conversation about Tory Taylor and how, probably this year coming up is his last year, and what are they doing to replace him, and who should it be, and this and that. And some people, including myself, were giving LeVar some criticism because we had a 5-star best punter in the country from Iowa, who Iowa did not recruit, who's going to Georgia, and he grew up a Hawkeye fan. So that would have been a total, home run, obvious that we offer him and that he comes to our team. They didn't do that. So some fans are like, oh, well, I trust LeVar Woods. Like, he's put us in such a great spot, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I trust him, but in this, I disagree. And it's not mutually exclusive. So you're right. Our society as a whole, like, nothing's mutually exclusive. Every box, like you say, has to be checked. And I'm just like, I came back on the message board when, it was going on. I said, it's not mutually exclusive. Do I respect LeVar, the heck out of LeVar as a coach? Yes, I do. Do I think he's making a mistake in not recruiting this punter? Yes, I do. It's not cut and dry. Nothing in life is black and white. And I think that, like you say, the society that we have, we're headed in that direction where everything's black and white, everything. And that's translated into college football. And I think it's a shame. I think that it's a reflection of people needing to be a bit more open-minded, maybe, and listening to other viewpoints besides their own. And it's at the end of the day, it's college football. It's not worth sitting here and getting upset about homers and people like me who are critical, etc. But I just think that scale or that spectrum is fascinating. Because you have people all over the spectrum. Most people are probably somewhere in the middle. But then you have people who are arguably, like me, probably too critical of their team. And then you have people who are just such homers that their team can never be wrong. Like I say about some Hawkeye fans, they see the world through black and gold glasses. There's nothing that can faze them. Iowa's always perfect. they can't do any better. They're perfect the way they are. And if they happen to do better, great. I just don't buy into that. I think that's garbage. And yeah, so that was my list. Just had those 3 items, and that's all I had.
Well, that was a thoughtful list. I appreciate that, Erica, thank you so much for the call.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, Erica. Have a good night.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate all your support. When we strike up these live streams, please let folks out there that you know on social media know that we're here talking college football with you. We like to think we provide the best discussion, debate, and analysis, and that's because of your contribution. We got James on the line. James, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. This is going to be a quick call because I have my own call and show to get to. But
okay.
So obviously I'm a big LSU homer, but I want to know your thoughts on the LSU versus FSU game, and do you have an idea of who you're going to pick to win?
I have little idea who I'm going to pick to win because I think that this year's game could mirror last year's game. I went into last year's game with not much of an idea who was going to win the game. Of course, I made a prediction on the game, but see, I think both of these programs and both of these rosters and teams have elevated almost equally. So basically, it was an even game last year among 2 talented but very flawed rosters, programs that were trying to come back. And now they both had a nice season and they've elevated from, let's say, fringe at the outset of last season, fringe top 25, 30 teams in the country to top 10 teams in the country, but almost equally. So I think it's going to be another toss-up of the game. I think the quarterback battle is intriguing. They're very similar players. I think that Florida State, surprisingly, has arguably a better wide receiver core, which almost shocks me to say that at this point, because they've really lacked at wide receiver and offensive line in the recent years, and they're probably going to field their best offensive line since maybe the national championship season. I think it's going to be a heck of a game. And I think Harold Perkins is, if not the best defensive player in the country, he's the most exciting and the player that's most capable of wrecking a game.
Yeah. As an LSU fan, I obviously think we're going to win the game.
Sure.
I think revenge, the revenge factor's there. And another thing, at Florida State, basically did not get to see Harold Perkins or Mason Smith last year. Harold Perkins barely got in the game last year. He was basically just on special teams, and Mason Smith got hurt on the first drive. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, they're going to get a full dose of both of them this year, and I really think that that's going to be the deciding factor. Our defense is going to make some big plays. That our front seven, I think, is one of the best in the country, and I think they're going to get to Jordan Travis, and it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great game, but I think we will win. So.
Well, before I let you go, what do you think about your running back situation?
I think we got a ton of bodies in there. I think we got like 6 guys that are going to get it carries. I think Logan Diggs, the transfer, he's going to be really good. He's going to be one of the lead backs. John Emery has some questions about his grades, but when he's in, he's good. He has a lot of potential. Josh Williams was there, very solid last year. Armani Goodwin was really good before he got hurt. And then we also got Noah Kane and a couple freshmen in there. So I don't think it's not like we got a stud in there, but I think we got a lot of bodies.
Okay. Well, James, I appreciate you calling.
Okay, yeah.
Have a good night.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's keep it moving along. We got the real MVP on the line. What's going on, man?
Oh, nothing much, Mark. How about you?
I am doing just fine.
Well, obviously, in my opinion, everybody's biased. I mean, that's just a product of who we are as people.
Sure.
I think it's literally impossible to be unbiased in
I
anything.
agree. I think you can minimize it greatly.
I agree with that.
Yes, it is impossible. I almost am going to state that as a fact.
Right. I would agree with that 100%. But you know what really bothers me, Mark, is when people on your Big Ten show, I'm not sure, did you watch all of that?
I did not.
Well, at the end, there was this claim that the gap between the SEC and Big Ten, it's closing, Mark. Any
Okay.
day now, okay? The Big Ten's just going to sail on by the SEC, you
Okay.
know, because I heard 3 reasons, okay? And if I missed any, I apologize. One,
Okay.
the Big Ten was closer in draft top end players drafted.
Okay.
So as you know, the Big Ten and the
True.
SEC tied this year. 2, Iowa beat Kentucky in a bowl game, 21-0. Now, it wasn't brought up that Will Levis was out or Chris Rodriguez was out, but it was brought up they lost 21-0. And 3, Penn State beat Auburn. Clearly, Penn State just going into Auburn, destroying them. Regardless, Penn State being the 3rd best team in their conference and Auburn being the next to worst team in their conference doesn't matter. So what do you think, Mark?
Well, I think to balance out the score results, Georgia beat Ohio State. Mississippi State beat Illinois. Am I missing anything else?
LSU beat Purdue.
LSU, I don't even know if there's a term for what they did to Purdue. Curb stomp does not do it justice. They backed up the truck endlessly until they ran out of gas and just continued to run over Purdue. 63-7? Now, Aiden O'Connell didn't play. Payne Durham, their best tight end, Charlie Jones. They had tons of weapons out still. You know, you got to show up and play, and that was just. And Jeff Brom took off and was gone. So yes, we like to conveniently forget scores when we're arguing our conferences against each other. So, what was the tote board last year? 3-2 SEC.
Oh yeah, and I'm being corrected in the chat. The Big Ten had 2 teams in the playoff was another reason brought up.
Well, that's a completely subjective selection. That means nothing.
It was brought up. I'm just the messenger, Mark. Okay, I'm not.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think Ohio State earned that final spot. They had the best record in the country over everybody else. But yeah, just the Big Ten having the 2 teams in the playoff, I think that shows that the Big Ten's better than the other. I think that's. Let me correct myself because I don't want to get caught up in my words where somebody's going to call me out. That's a indicator that the Big Ten's better than the other conferences, but the Big Ten showed up and they lost 2 games. Now we can talk about how close they were and how excruciatingly close and all that, and that's all valid. I cite it many times. We've had the conversation ever since the games ended, how close they were, but they still lost the 2 games. I don't think that well, let me clarify that. It's not an argument right now. It's just not.
Yeah,
I wish it was.
It bothers me that people are still trying to bring it up as an argument.
I wish it was. I hope that things will change this season and we will either say at the end of this season, the Big Ten is the best conference in college football. There's no question about it. Or we will be like, who knows who's the best, because Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and Georgia made the playoff, and I'm going to swing it my way just because I can and because we're making up a hypothetical situation. Ohio State beat Georgia 38-37 in the national championship game. So basically, who knows? But that has yet to transpire. It hasn't happened.
Right.
It could
and there's
happen.
Nothing that's saying, oh my gosh, every year the SEC is going to lose 1 or 2 games out of conference. It just has to happen mathematically. I mean, there's no way I could see them going undefeated. Hey, Mark, what I'm afraid is going to happen is South Carolina is going to lose to North Carolina, or Utah is going to beat Florida by like 40, and everybody's going to be like, well, that's it. The SEC is now the worst conference. Might as well ride them off completely.
Yes.
Because if they're willing to do that over Iowa versus Kentucky and Penn State, Auburn.
Yeah, let's also understand that Penn State won the Rose Bowl. They were the number 7 or 8 team in the country, and Auburn didn't even make a bowl game.
Right, but from what I'm being told, unless every SEC team goes 12-0, then they're just all trash. That's what the implications I'm receiving is.
The fair competition would have been if Michigan State would have gone to Auburn and won.
Right.
That Penn State Auburn game, and sure, the game was played, it was scheduled. It's a win for the Big Ten. They should be credited. But that's like saying Tennessee went to Indiana and won. What does that prove?
Not a whole lot of anything.
That's pretty much the same thing. Third best team in the SEC goes and tramples one of the worst teams in the Big Ten.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, think about it going forward, Mark. I mean, just the stacked talent of the SEC. It's going to be really hard for them to beat. I mean, you got Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, South Carolina. Clemson can't even beat South Carolina. Where is South Carolina going to be going forward in the SEC? They're probably going to be you're struggling to make a bowl game.
Okay. Well, this lineup's pretty strong too. Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota. Michigan State can always come back.
Yeah, after those first three, I think there's a significant drop-off to Penn State, and then there's a massive drop-off. Whereas
I don't know if it's yes, it's currently a drop-off, but if you're going to bring up South Carolina, then I can certainly bring up the likes of what Michigan State has been, and Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota.
I guess, but I think most years the SEC is probably going to have 5 of the 8 non-best programs in the country. If you go by historical perspective.
Oh, if you go by historical perspective?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out the average here, Mark. I mean, if we're projecting forward, we got to go by the average.
You don't think the Big Ten has 4 of the top 10 programs in the country? Historically? Well, historically,
USC, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, maybe.
Yeah.
They're right on the edge, in my opinion. But I guess you can put them in there at 10, but I don't see them climbing up any higher than that.
Okay. Well, I didn't know we were bringing history into it.
Well, I think if you have to look going forward what you're projecting, you got to look in the past.
The recent past.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do that, I mean, I'm being told that the SEC is only Georgia, Bama, and LSU, which is, Mark, can you just dispel that myth that the SEC is only 3 teams and everybody else just irrelevant?
Well, let's understand that it's only been 3 years ago, not even 3 seasons ago. It's only been 2 seasons ago since Florida had just won its 3rd consecutive, or played in its 3rd consecutive, won 2 out of 3 New Year's 6 games. So that's how close Florida is, even though they seem like a dumpster fire right this second, because they went 6-6 the last 2 years. They basically have been Maryland the last 2 years. They were just playing in New Year's 6 games and winning them. And that could happen again like that. And there are tons of examples in the SEC. Yes, the SEC is a better conference, and anybody can come on here and argue with me about it if they would like, but it's not going to be much of an argument.
Right.
And I would love for it to be an argument.
Is it getting closer? Because I don't think it's really, if you look based on the results on the field, I don't remember 2 years ago them beating the Pac-12 champ, the ACC champ twice, probably the second best team in the Big Ten, and the Big 12 champ. I don't remember that happening 2 years ago. Do you, Mark?
No. What the SEC accomplished in the postseason is pretty astounding. Like you say, Clemson went undefeated in the ACC, and they got beat down twice by SEC teams. Ohio State was certainly the second best team in the Big Ten. They may have been the best team in the Big Ten, and That's actually a loss is the Big Ten's best argument for being elite this last season, because Ohio State's performance in that game was the best performance by, I think it's pretty obvious. Ohio State's performance in that game against Georgia was the best performance by any college football team outside the SEC the entire season.
I would agree with that. I'll even go one step further. I think that was the second best performance all year in college football. But they still lost.
Yeah,
which just shows you how good Georgia is.
Best performance. So on that night, at least, those were the two best teams in college football.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So I just want to make it clear for everybody. You think the SEC gap from 2 years ago to last year has grown. It has not shrunk.
Well, I think it's
based on the results on the field.
2 years ago, 2021?
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's roughly the same.
Thank you, Mark. I just wanted that myth dispelled.
If anything, Tennessee has elevated and LSU has elevated back to where we expect LSU to be. And Tennessee's gotten better under Josh Heupel.
Significantly better to where they have been historically. Because for most people under 30, after Peyton Manning, they've been basically an irrelevant team nationally.
Yes.
But before that, they were a legit team.
Oh, absolutely.
And now they're just back to where they have been. So it seems logical that they would continue being this way going forward. I don't see any reason not to be excited about Josh Heupel and the future of Tennessee.
But again, Florida down, Auburn down, Texas A&M, at least for one season, down.
You're exactly right, Mark. You're exactly right. Well, thank you.
DeReal, appreciate it.
Yeah, I know I stirred up I saw the chat just whizzing by compared to your previous few callers. So it seemed like I got some people irked and irate. But hey, they can call in and make their case against it, Mark.
Absolutely. Thanks, DeReal.
No problem. And shout out to Shoelace Sooner's wife, by the way.
Absolutely.
Congrats to her.
That's awesome. Thanks, DeReal. All right, let's keep it going. We've got David Green Shield here.
How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Let's talk about. Well, DeReal started it too. I want to go where DeReal went here in a second. I'm not going to deny his assertions, but I might deny the gap he's saying. So I'm not going to deny the assertion that the SEC is the best conference, but I might deny that the gap is as big as he thinks it is.
Okay. I really don't know what you think it is, or even after talking to him, exactly what he thinks it is. I guess I need numbers to be applied or something. If the SEC is a 10, what is the Big Ten?
Well, I mean, okay, the best year I would say the Big Ten had in postseason was 2014, wouldn't you say? Against the
Ohio
SEC,
State, Michigan State, Wisconsin. Who else did anything that year?
I think the Big Ten had a winning record in bowl games over the SEC that year. At least I think it went at least 2-2 against the SEC.
Ohio State beat Alabama. Wisconsin beat Auburn.
Right.
Actually, Michigan State had a big Cotton Bowl win over Baylor.
They did beat Baylor.
2014. Who else was involved there? Was that the? I think
that was the year the SEC had.
I think Minnesota lost to Missouri in the.
Right. That's true. And then I think Tennessee beat up Iowa, I think, in a bowl game that year, if I was mistaken.
Yes.
But it may have been 2-2, but then the Big Ten won the big one and then won the national title.
Yes.
So if I were to say after that year,
okay,
I wouldn't have said after that year that I think the Big Ten is a better conference than the SEC just because of that good postseason, But if you just mentioned Ohio State's performance, if the kick goes in, Mark, and the Big Ten's record against the SEC becomes even at that point this year, if Ohio State gets the win over Georgia.
Well, I think it's actually swings in the Big Ten's favor.
So
I didn't add it up, but I think it was 3-2 SEC.
Right. Okay. So it swings in the Big Ten's favor, and then Ohio State wins the national championship because it beats TCU. Do I think even at that point that the Big Ten's a better conference than the SEC? No, I wouldn't say that. But it would have had a better, bowl season than the.
There's an argument.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, my whole point here is what I would say though is he was talking about the top 3 or 4 programs, and you kind of went there. If he's saying that the top 10 programs, now I got the feeling that DeReal is not putting a whole lot of stock into Penn State. That's probably the vibe that I got from him. Yeah. And I kind of hear where he's going. But if you said that the top 3 teams in the SEC are Alabama, Georgia, and LSU, we already talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, those are going to be the top 3 teams this year. And the top 3 teams in the Big Ten are Ohio State, the team up north, and Penn State. Okay? And all 3 of those teams played each other. I think we'd have really good football games. I don't think we'd have blowout City USA.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think there's a chance the Big Ten could go 2-1 in those games. The SEC might not buy that, but I think the Big Ten could go 2-1.
There's only 2 problems with what you're bringing to the table, David.
And I know where you're going to go before you go there.
It's hypothetical.
It is hypothetical.
Versus we're discussing is the word, what the SEC has done actually in results. So factual results.
Okay.
Versus
but I thought what DeReal was talking about was
hypothetical situation of these 3 teams playing, these 6 teams playing. Number 1. Number 2, yes, I'm going to bring up what about the rest of the conference?
Yeah, what about the depth of the conference? Yeah, I knew you were going to go there. Yeah, and I get that. Although I do think at 4, I think it'd be close. Like I think if Tennessee and Wisconsin played on a neutral field, I wouldn't be surprised to see that be a 1-possession game.
Who and who?
Tennessee and Wisconsin. If Tennessee is the 4th best team in the SEC and Wisconsin's the 4th best team in the Big Ten, which does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a 7-point game one way or another, or would you be surprised?
Unless things drastically change, I would expect Tennessee to win that game, but I wouldn't be shocked if Wisconsin won it.
Okay.
Mike Ford says Wisconsin's not the 4th best team in the conference. If they're not, I don't know. It does drop and things will change. Let's understand that. We tend to get locked in on this is the way things are, but things will change. Somebody's going to elevate. Wisconsin, Iowa, somebody. Maybe Nebraska finally does something at some point. I don't expect it this season, but there will be other teams that will get into the mix. But there is a gap between Penn State and everybody else based on last season.
Like I think at the high end, I think the Big Ten I think the gap is, I think the Big Ten's making some progress. And in going forward in the future, as I told you before, Mark, I'll take USC's prospects of winning a national championship in the next 5 to 7 years over I'll take Texas or Oklahoma's prospects of winning a national championship within the next 5 to 7 years.
Agreed.
So
yeah, I'll take USC against those 2.
Right.
But I do think it's also reasonable to say that Oklahoma and Texas together are a better addition than the other 2.
Okay. Yeah, that's also fair too. So, I mean, I think the trajectory of the Big Ten, though, is also where I was going with my statement as well, Mark. I think that the trajectory of the Big Ten is a lot better than where it was at 3 years ago or 4 years ago as overall with the conference.
We might as well bring in our Michigan contingent. So we got one of these rare occasions where the Ohio State and Michigan contingents may be teaming up together.
Hey, I understand to the Team Up North fan, I'm just defending our conference. So, Mike, it's conference pride here that I'm arguing for. So maybe Mike will be happy to add the conference pride here. Maybe we can have some agreement on that.
Mike,
go on. I'm sorry. What was that, Mark?
Just a second, Mike, before we let you cut loose. Yes, Illinois might have been the 4th best team in the Big Ten last year. But I don't see them as the 4th best team or program. I believe that Illinois lost more talent than any team in the country compared to the amount of talent they have left over, if you follow me. Georgia lost more talent, but Illinois could not afford to lose that talent. They lost more talent compared to what they had on the roster.
Well, is the argument who was the fourth best team last year, or who do you think is the fourth best team for this coming year?
I think it's a little bit of both, but what's more important is coming up.
Well, yeah, I don't think I'd give that title to Illinois for this coming year.
Gotcha.
That would probably be Maryland could possibly be in there. Iowa's in the hunt for that. But I thought we were talking about last year.
We could be.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin is maybe I'm buying a little bit into Luke Fickell, but
I am too.
As a program, I just think that they're, if they plot back with a 9-3 season this year, or something like that, I don't think anybody would be shocked.
I wouldn't be.
No, I think that Mark, what I was saying too about Tennessee is I wouldn't be surprised if they fell back a little bit in the SEC this year, because to lose your quarterback and your two starting wide receivers, that's a lot of productivity to go out the door.
Well, I agree with that, because I said in the chat that last year Tennessee was I called them a portal baby. They kind of poached a lot of their talent, and a lot of it's not coming back. So I don't. And keep in mind, I think I'm still seeing raw footage in my head of South Carolina, which is a mid-level team, just beat the brakes off of them, and that it's kind of hard to unwatch that. So,
but you're arguing SEC against SEC. That's a null and void argument when you're trying to tear down a conference that they lost to another team in the conference.
Well, I mean, a lot of people hype up Iowa because they have a history of, sticking it to teams that are clearly better than them.
Yeah, but I don't hear that when arguing for the conference. Like, you're arguing that Tennessee's not really that good because they lost to South Carolina. Well, South Carolina resides. Tennessee went out and beat the ACC champion by 17 points in the Orange Bowl. It's pretty impressive. Let me size it up here, and then you guys can just cut loose for a little while.
Okay.
Let's list off who the SEC beat last year. Let's listen to the impressive list of Ohio State, TCU, Oregon, Utah, Kansas State, Texas, Purdue, Miami, Illinois.
Yeah, Mark, are you going to put Miami in the impressive category? Is that?
I'm listing off.
Are you naming wins or
you
good
broke
wins?
My stride here.
Okay.
believe me, we don't want to list who the SEC beat last year and compare it to who the Big Ten beat.
Okay, let's not have that.
I hear your point.
It's not even close. Like, who did the Big Ten beat last year? Notre Dame.
Well, I mean, it would be helpful to have some major non-conference opponents for
Auburn.
Some schools have some
Auburn.
major non-conference.
Wisconsin
games.
beat another Power 5, didn't they?
Jokingly saying Auburn, Mike, because a lot of Big Ten people, I saw it in the chat. Penn State beat Auburn. Who cares? That's like Tennessee beating Indiana. Like, Auburn was 2-6 in the SEC. Like,
yeah, but when you beat an SEC team by 30 in their own backyard, it doesn't matter.
The third best team that won the Rose Bowl and finished in the top 10 in the country went and beat Auburn, who was like beating Indiana. Like,
what did Auburn finish last year? Was it like 7-5, 8-4?
5-7.
Oh, that bad, huh?
2-6 in the
Harsin was coaching on borrowed time.
Yes.
Well, I know they were calling for his head most of the year.
That's just.
I didn't know they were that bad.
And that's not discounting what Penn State did. They can only do what they can do, and that's line up and win the game, and they won convincingly.
Yeah, I guess the only retribution for the Big Ten for the non-conference would, and that's kind of where I was going with the postseason, Mark, is you have to get it back into the postseason. If that's why I said if I was thinking if the fourth quarter goes a little bit different in our game, then maybe it would have folks, because like you said, that would have flipped the bowl record, and then if you could have had the champion too, then that would have been a major. Now again, as I said earlier, even if Ohio State would have done that, I still am saying that the SEC is an overall stronger conference. I'm just
Hmm.
making the case that right now the fact that the higher end of the Big Ten has come up, I think the conference is. I'm just wondering that the gap is as great as Darrell was making it out to
It's
be.
pretty big.
Well,
It is. I get that.
I think it's when you get into
And then
that
I
middle.
shouldn't say it like that. I think it's measurable. It's not a huge gap. I think it's reasonable. It's
Mm,
there is a gap. I think I'm at a loss for what the word should be, but it's measurable.
yeah.
I didn't even bring up beating Clemson twice and beating Pitt. Like this conference won a lot of non-conference games.
It did. Well, I think a lot of this is because and the main argument I would side with the real is that we're incredibly top heavy. We don't have the top down teams. Like, I mean, if you want to argue Tennessee is fourth, I mean, whether you have fourth as an Iowa or an Illinois or a Maryland or a Wisconsin, I think Tennessee probably beats all of them. I don't think they blow them out, but I think they would probably beat all of them.
Yeah, I try to make the argument top four because like I said, if Wisconsin's the fourth best program and Tennessee's the fourth best program, then I think that's a close game, especially maybe this year if they played. I think that'd be a close game.
I think
Uh,
last year it wouldn't be close, but I think this year it would be.
yeah, that's true. Although Tennessee might not be the fourth best team in the SEC this year. Um,
I would agree.
that's where it's going to be interesting to see the SEC after the top three teams, and actually a team probably could sneak into it this year. Maybe Mark, what do you think? Ole Miss, maybe?
Could sneak into the what? The
You think Ole Miss
championship
could be
game?
the fourth best team in the
Oh, the
conference?
fourth best team in the conference. Well,
Oh,
they've
over
got
Kentucky?
quarterbacks to trade. If they need to shore up other units on the team, they could, trade one of their would-be three starting quarterbacks. Yes, Quinshawn Judkins, tremendous running back. Yeah, I think Ole Miss is could be the fourth best team. Could be.
Well, the problem was that Ole Miss, they tend to shine out against teams they should be, and whenever the rubber needs to meet the road, they tend to start laying eggs. Because I remember last year, didn't they start off like 8-0?
Yes,
And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the bottom just fell out.
they
So
played Alabama really close.
Yep. See, it's like you're right, Mark. The middle where you get like into an Arkansas, maybe an Ole Miss. See, I think and then like you said, though, Florida's down
Makes
right now. The a real disappointment program, and I think Jimbo's job is on the line this year. I think most people
Obviously.
probably would say is Texas A&M. People have been trying to talk up Texas A&M.
Thanks for
but-
reminding me, David.
Yeah.
Arkansas by themselves beat Kansas, BYU, and Cincinnati.
Right.
There's nobody in the Big Ten doing that.
So are we saying that the Big Ten needs to schedule out of conference opponents a little bit more?
Yes.
Yeah, the bowl record wasn't awful. It could have been better. It was okay. Obviously, they lost 2 playoff games. They won the Rose Bowl. And other than that, they won some games that were good wins. I think if Minnesota goes to play Syracuse in a bowl game and they're both about where they are in their league and they win the game, and Wisconsin does the same against Oklahoma State, those are good wins.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Iowa losing to Iowa State, who finished in last place in the Big 12, not the greatest look.
Well, neither was watching the game.
Well,
Yeah,
that was every week. Yes.
I would say that some of our teams in our conference need to pick up their non-conference schedule a little bit.
I think some of the top teams. I wish our non-conference schedule was better.
I don't want to say anything, Mike. I was hoping you
Yeah.
would go there for me.
Yeah, I admit I would like to see us play something other than the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Well, Ohio State's got one of those coming up next season.
Yeah, it's bad, and I'll take ownership of that. I mean, Ohio State has they'll have a few years where you'll get a Texas, maybe do a USC, then they do the home and home with Oklahoma, and then you get this home and home with Notre Dame. But then there's like a few years in between where there's like a tail off. But college football is totally changing in 24. So with 12 team, we can debate whether that's changing for the better or changing for the worse. I have my doubts. I was more of an 8 person, but still, I mean, these non-conference games that we love, you can really afford to lose them now because what 9-3 is going to get you into the playoff.
Yeah, and now it's more of a kind of a litmus test because at some point in time, if you have a bunch of teams that are at the cusp of 12-0, 11-1, you really that's where having a non-conference, bunch of buys might help because you don't have to really measure yourself against that good win, quote unquote. Whereas now, if the field's got 2 or 3 lost teams making it in, then you can say, well, this is a good win, and this team, they kind of skirted a lot of out of conference competition.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? There's nothing like a big game atmosphere in college football. And college football, Mark and me have talked about it before. It was considered to have the greatest regular season of any sport, and now it's being totally diminished by a 12-team playoff. And these
Yeah.
big non-conference games, like I remember looking forward to that Texas game to start the '05 year, all summer, thinking about that game. And we lost a heartbreaker there, and against Vince Young's Texas team. You look forward to those games all year, and now it's like, well, you're looking at it more from a college football, more like an NFL type situation. You afford to lose a few games. As long as we get to this record, we're probably going to make the playoff.
Well, I mean, that's just a numbers. The fewer games there are, the more they mean. I mean, like with basketball, you can drop 5, 6 games in basketball. Big deal. You play
Sure.
40.
We're only going to beat this into your heads one more time because I did put too much work into it to let it go.
Okay.
Anybody out there, correct me if I'm missing anything. Erica, we will get to your super chat there. Let me get rid of these. So those are the SEC wins. Ohio State. This is pretty deep. Ohio State, Oregon, Utah, Kansas State, Texas, TCU, Clemson twice, Kansas, BYU, Cincinnati, Purdue, Illinois, Pitt. So I use my criteria as these are winning teams, winning record teams. Big Ten, Notre Dame, Utah, Kentucky, Oklahoma State, Syracuse.
Well, the problem with that is it seems like a third of that list is Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, they play in the conference.
Again.
Well, what am I? Okay, then I'm going to eliminate Ohio State and Penn State, and you got to take Notre Dame and Utah off the board. You can't just eliminate teams. Okay, if you take off Georgia, then you take off Ohio State and Oregon.
And you take off Alabama, so there goes Kansas State, there goes Texas.
And I'll still take Utah, TCU. Well, TCU is Georgia. I'll still take Utah.
And then you got the 2 Clemson games. Other than that, nothing there really shines. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
beating Pitt, beating Purdue, beating Cincinnati, beating
Mike,
BYU.
you're eliminating games and then saying that's not that much of a list when you just eliminated like 6 of the games.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you're going for a whole conference,
If you're going for a whole conference, we could eliminate Alabama and Georgia, and the rest of the SEC still beat a better list of teams than the Big Ten did.
I'm not arguing that.
What was Florida's final record this year and Miami's final record this year, Mark?
6-7, 5-7.
So Florida was what were they? Were 5-7?
Florida was 6-7.
6-7. Okay.
And they
beat Utah.
Yeah.
In the swamp.
Right. Yeah, they got the one big. They got the big win. That was the opening for AR. By the way, probably helped his draft status there with that performance. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's too bad that Penn State caught it. Well, they wouldn't have if it was a decent Auburn team. They probably don't go in there and annihilate them by 30 points.
Yeah, Auburn was definitely down this year. So
yeah. I
So,
think
yeah.
that the one thing is that I like I said I think if the Big Ten had a little bit I mean how many teams good teams in non-conference in the Big Ten ended up playing? I know Wisconsin ended up playing Washington State was their best non-conference opponent, and they played them at home this year and lost.
I can go through the list
Yeah.
and we can go who they lost to.
Yeah, because I'm trying to wonder of how many big non-conference games
well,
that Big Ten teams actually
Most of
scheduled
them,
this
most
year.
of them lost to nobody.
Well, I don't know.
Basically, the SEC basically, Bama lost to nobody, Georgia lost to nobody, Tennessee lost to nobody, Missouri lost to Wake Forest. There you go, throw them up there, and actually so did Vandy. So there's 2 losses to Wake Forest. South Carolina lost to Notre Dame. A&M lost to App State. Arkansas didn't lose to anybody out of the conference. Oh, yeah, they did.
A&M lost to Miami, didn't they?
Pardon me?
Did A&M lose to Miami, or did they
No,
beat Miami?
They beat Miami.
I remember it was an embarrassing game to watch, but I couldn't remember which game.
LSU lost to Florida State. There's no big shame in that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Kentucky lost to Iowa. Oh, I forgot to include Kentucky beat Louisville. There's another bowl team with a winning record, 8-5 record that Kentucky beat. So I forgot them. Okay.
Well, this is going to be a much longer list.
Well, Georgia. That's Ohio State. Michigan lost to TCU. Penn State lost to no one. Maryland. Indiana lost to Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's not a good one.
Rutgers actually stuck up for the Big Ten and beat Boston College. It was awful, just like they were, but at least they won the game.
Wisconsin lost that one to Washington State.
Washington State,
we got Washington and Washington State.
I can say Michigan State lost to Washington.
Right.
Yeah,
that was kind of a predictable
Iowa
loss.
State.
Yeah, that's a
Nebraska
bad one.
lost to Oklahoma.
Oh, they got trounced by Oklahoma. That was rough.
Here's the school right here. Northwestern lost to Miami of Ohio and Duke and Eastern Illinois?
Yeah, you're going to run out of room if you're going to include all of Northwestern's losses.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, Northwestern, Nebraska. Purdue lost to LSU and Syracuse. Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota didn't lose to anybody out at the conference, so I think we got everyone. I think so. And then, let's see. Did we miss anyone in the SEC?
I think did Purdue have did Purdue lose? Yeah, I think Purdue lost that game to Syracuse. Mark.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, he has on under.
Oh, okay, you got it at the end. Okay, yeah, my bad. Yeah, that was Heartbreak Hotel. They blew that game. I watched the end of that one.
They did. That was a
Purdue should have
really
had that
good game, and the officials didn't help them. They got a little too involved in the game, and they should have just stayed out of it.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
Yeah, Purdue was like kicking off from the 5-yard line.
Yeah, they got a celebration penalty. I think ended up costing that game.
Well,
as I remember.
David, it was a celebration penalty, and then they flagged Brom for going out onto the field when it was shown that he barely walked out onto the field. And again, referees getting flag happy when they don't need to be involved, and it was ridiculous. Purdue kicked off from the 5-yard line.
Right.
And that just set up Syracuse still had to make plays, but it's set up.
Oh yeah, DeReal mentioned in the chat that Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern. This is really starting to look bad now.
We should have stayed with Nebraska.
Poor Nebraska.
We should have known that. Yes, Georgia Southern.
But that end of that Scott Frost era was not exactly the best.
The beginning of the Scott Frost era wasn't that best.
Yeah, that's true.
So anybody else out there help me? Ole Miss lost to Texas Tech in their bowl game. Oh, and Illinois lost to.
And see, and Texas Tech is
State.
not
Mississippi State,
good.
yeah.
So I mean, that
They were.
what were they,
Texas
7-5?
Tech. Yeah.
So I don't see Ole Miss as really in the running for the fourth spot in the SEC.
But again, so the Big Ten lost. If we're accurate here, I can't think of any other games. Rutgers, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State didn't lose to anyone.
Well, and the real argument against us is that the bottom of our conference is the bottom.
Right.
But
Well,
even the top of the conference didn't hardly beat anyone. Notre Dame and Utah. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the Mark's argument also, I think it is the middle and the bottom that really is where the SEC at, because with the Big Ten, Michigan State being kind of in a situation where they're at, after Kenneth Walker Jr. helped Mel Tucker make a lot of money, and now that program's, who knows where they're at going into this season. And then just the overall West. I mean, what's the West going to look like?
Roger Dodger, good one.
How good are Iowa?
Missouri lost to Kansas State.
I was gonna say, I thought Missouri wasn't up there yet. Well, Michigan State's in shambles right now. Pretty much anybody with NFL, aspirations.
Florida lost to Florida, and LSU lost to Florida State.
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, you did have the Florida State loss. Yeah.
10, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. 10 losses versus 14.
Well, and the SEC losses aren't terrible. Some of the Big Ten losses are just embarrassing.
Yeah. I think that shows the kind of the status of where a few of those programs are at right now, like in the middle and lower tier programs are situated right now. And it's that's the concern. I guess because kind of the hierarchy of the program seem to be situated fairly well right now. It's just it's when will the middle tier, can the middle tier or the bottom tier come up? And who's going to be a middle tier program or a bottom tier program to come up?
Well, I got to say, if all you guys are concerned with is how it looks, this 12-team playoff could be a great remedy, because the Big Ten, to your original point, David, looks to be in pretty good shape to match the SEC at the top. And then only people, nerds like me, are going to dissect it all the way down to Rutgers and Vanderbilt. So everybody else is just going to look at the playoff, and if Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Penn State can show up in the playoffs and take care of business, then that's all anyone's going to care about.
Yeah, because the SEC's bragging rights for years has always just been the bowl games and obviously the Natties.
So we need somebody in the conference to step up and be king of the hill once. Then we can start making the argument.
We cracked the code once. I will say that. Listen, it's a tough code to crack because, once you get to Sweet Tea Country, they've got a lot of advantages. I mean, they've got dollars. The recruiting bases are in the South.
Yeah, and you got to win the games there. Ohio State had to go to New Orleans and beat Alabama.
Yeah, LSU's played 4 national championship games all in the Superdome. That's the equivalent of them playing in the Silver Dome and us playing at Cleveland Browns Stadium. I don't know how that works out. LSU plays 4 national championship games all in the Superdome.
4?
Yeah. 2000 when they beat Oklahoma.
07, 11.
They beat us.
Oh, yeah.
03, 07, 11, and
19.
19.
The Burrow team. Yep.
That is wild, isn't it?
Think about that.
Coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, they're never. I don't think they ever. Well, to be fair, Alabama and Georgia played that title game in Indianapolis, so they decided to come up here one time and play
in a dome.
Yeah, in a dome.
Well, that's where it's going to be played. If it's going to be played in the North.
Hell, the Super Bowl was once held in New York. So
Yeah, New York
you,
City.
They had the Meadowlands. Yep.
Yes.
yeah, you're telling me you can't do a cold weather site one time? The NFL did it.
They
Well,
would
I
be-
think the Meadowlands is the reason why they don't do it again, because they got hit with a pretty bad blizzard, if I remember right.
Well, yeah, remember
No.
Seattle and Denver lucked
No,
out to
if I
get great
remember-
weather for that game, by the way.
If I remember right, yeah, the weather was like 48 degrees. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought the weather was bad in the
For that
outdoor
Super
one.
Bowl? No.
No, Seattle, Denver had great weather. It wasn't a great game for Denver, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they did it once, and be interesting to see if they ever did. And college football morphing into the NFL. Maybe they'll decide to do that. I don't know.
I think there'd be too much pushback.
Yeah, probably. They want to see it as
Yeah,
a
it was
reward.
49 degrees at kickoff.
Oh wow, is that warm? I thought it was in the 20s. And it's been a while. Well, I just remember being happy because I can't stand Peyton Manning. So
Oh, I was rooting for Peyton Manning.
yeah,
Yeah.
you would.
Why wouldn't I? Peyton Manning's a good guy. Now, I was right on the Super Bowl. I said Seattle's going to blow them out of the stadium.
Oh wow, you called it.
I picked like a 34-10 final.
You weren't that far off.
Jeez, you thought that was going to be a blowout, huh, Mark?
34-10 was my score.
Go with the defense, right?
That's right.
That was a defense too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Peyton Manning waited 2 years later. He got his
His second.
yeah.
reign.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that he got carried by his defense.
I was going to say Denver won in spite of him, not because of him.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, those are like the Roethlisberger Pittsburgh
Yes,
wins.
it was not
Yeah.
a great performance by Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, but if we're going to delve off into an NFL discussion,
No.
just again, I pride myself in bringing a little context here. So if you remember, Brock Osweiler was the starting quarterback. Manning was so bad that season that he lost his job. He got hurt, and then there was this big controversy over, do you bring Peyton Manning back, because who in the world benches Peyton Manning? It just doesn't happen. But they could possibly make the excuse that he's just not completely healthy. And Brock Osweiler was playing fairly well, but they gave Manning the job back, and he had two really good playoff games. He did have two really good playoff. He played well the last like one or two games of the season, and then against the Steelers and the Patriots in the playoffs.
Yeah, he
But
did
yeah,
play great
Super
against
Bowl
the Pats.
Was not. Yeah, they did.
By the way,
They
one
had
of the
Cam Newton to like roll the ball on the ground for him.
one of the ugliest Super Bowl games I've ever
Yeah.
seen was that Carolina Denver game. That
It
is not
was.
one for the record books.
No.
I mean, great game for Broncos fans, but if not aesthetically pleasing,
No.
if
Well-
you're just a casual football fan.
Awful. Yeah.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Denver was on the losing side of ugly Super Bowls.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
When everybody felt bad for Elway because he just make it the Super Bowl just to get trounced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope our conference can do better in non-conference this year, and we're gonna have to see about the bowl games, right?
Yes. Ohio State, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Minnesota's got a date at North Carolina. I think that's a nice little under the radar
That's-
out of conference matchup.
That's going to be a rough trip for Minnesota.
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah, Drake May could really light up that team, Mark. I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know.
think I see those kind of matchups completely different. I see that as North Carolina can't stop, a running nose, and they're soft, and Minnesota's going to go down there and lay down some defense.
Well, I mean, yeah, the other day when you're talking about which team is going to be the three, go
Yep.
a 3 game, I said Minnesota. I said Minnesota is going to drop because they were 9-4. I could easily see them being sub 500 because, I mean, Ibrahim doesn't have a ninth year of eligibility, so he's gone. Yeah, you don't have 35-year-old Ibrahim anymore. Tanner Morgan's gone, I believe, or what's his name?
Yeah, I think his backup's better. Kalki Manis.
You think his backup's better? I don't remember seeing that much of him.
I'm gonna lay the odds on North Carolina laying the wood on a Mark. I think May's
Yeah.
gonna light up that defense
Dang.
like a Christmas tree.
Give
Yeah,
me
I agree.
points. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, I bet the line is going to be in the double digits.
Oh,
Oh,
I can
man,
see that.
if that line's double digits, I will take Minnesota in a heartbeat.
No, I got Carolina by at least 2 touchdowns.
No,
Mark.
I'm siding with, it feels weird saying that. I'm siding
Yeah.
with David on this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they lay the wood to them. I just don't know if this is a good flex team. I don't think this is 2019 Minnesota where they pop up and have a nice 11-2
I'll,
kind of year.
they don't have to. They're playing again a paper tiger.
Yeah, but that tiger roars. It might be paper, but that tiger
I don't know
roars.
who they're roaring against.
Well, didn't they average like 52, 53 points a game at one point
Yeah,
in time
they
of the
lost.
season?
Yeah,
They-
against.
I thought they were going to pull out that bowl game against Oregon. That was a heck
Yeah,
of a game. By the way,
yeah, it
one of
was.
the better bowl games was that Oregon North Carolina
this
game.
Big
Mark.
Ten
Yeah.
contingent is. You guys are wilting.
Well, we recognize that
You're
there are
a
some.
case for North Carolina.
Well, we recognize that there are some teams in our conference that aren't holding up their end of the bargain.
Minnesota's not.
Yes, Minnesota is not.
Their,
think they've
their
just been
last
hit or miss.
3 seasons.
I think they've been a little hit or miss.
Their last 3 full seasons are 11-2, 9-4, 9-4.
They're not going to be 9-4 this year. I'll put money on that. In
I'm
fact,
not forecasting the future. I'm just speaking facts. We don't know what they're going to do this year.
well, true, but I mean, if they go 6, I think they're probably 6-6, possibly 5-7 this coming season.
If anybody wants to give me Minnesota in 2 touchdowns, I'm here.
You know what? Everybody has that quarterback ranked as like one of the top quarterbacks in college football this year. Mark, talking him up.
Yeah,
I mean-
including me. That's
What's his projected
didn't-
graph?
That didn't keep him from losing. He accounted for 45 touchdowns last year. That didn't mean that they didn't lose 5 games.
Well, their defense was god awful.
Exactly.
Well, you think that all of a sudden the quarterback replacing Tanner Morgan is going to go in there and just light the world on fire? I got to see this new Minnesota quarterback before.
Yeah, I
get
want to see
really-
it too.
He's better than
before I
Tanner
get real
Morgan.
excited, Mark. I got to be real with you.
Hey,
I know
All right.
Tanner Morgan had some stretches of inconsistency there, but I don't remember him being so bad that they were benching him to putting in the second string.
Yeah, you know what? It'd be an interesting year for Fleck. I mean, can he get him to a 7-5, 8-4 kind of year, kind of duplicate? Because his early years were dicey, Mark. I mean, this little
Oh, yeah.
run he had was, remember, well, what was his first year there? It was 17 or 18?
7-6.
Yeah.
Okay. That's still.
It's dicey. He just took over a program, and he went 7-6 and won a bowl game.
Okay. Yeah, but it really didn't pop though until these last 3, specifically the 19.
Those were
years
the
when
next 3 seasons.
Yeah, then it did pop. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the 19 year was unbelievable. I mean, to go 11-2 at Minnesota is like, yeah.
Reminiscent of the 50s and 60s.
You
Well, yeah,
guys are responding like I hear a lot of people respond to Iowa out there outside of Big Ten circles, and they just figure, oh, well, our team would whip Iowa because they can't score.
Yeah.
Well, no, they won't, because you're not going to score.
Well, not a lot of teams whip Iowa. I mean, there are teams that beat Iowa, but it's not like Iowa's going to give up, 40, 50 points. Now, they did to Ohio State, but keep in mind that,
Thank you.
shut up.
Thanks.
I mean, they gave up that
Throwing
many
one out there, Mike.
because Petrus literally gave them, 5, 6, 7 free possessions?
Yes, it was.
So if you take those away, it might have been like a
He gave 'em-
17-10 game.
Yes, he gave him the first play of the game, and he never stopped after that.
So if Minnesota scores that win though, Mark, you got to put that one on the board though. Although I
yeah.
guess you're going to have to see how North Carolina seasons plays out before you put that on the big board and give the Big Ten its love though, right?
Like
Well,
we're gonna.
if they beat Carolina, there should be like stars and colors all around that win.
You guys are wow. Minnesota was better than North Carolina last year. Not by
Yeah, I just
much.
I would say it was a push.
I just don't see him going to Tar Heel country in winning, Mark.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a rough trip.
Yeah, if it was in
Oh, I'm not
Minnesota,
saying
I'd
they're
give it a little bit
winning.
more of a chance.
I'm just saying that they're going to be competitive.
Okay. And I'm no, the ACC is, the ACC. I get it, but I have a feeling that this is a little bit of a fallback year for Fleck. That's more like his first year, a 7-6 kind of year at best. The 6-6,
Okay.
somewhere in that neighborhood.
Well, like I said, we agree on that one. We'll know when the season starts, but I'm on board for like a 6-6 era.
I am interested to see who this quarterback that Mark is talking up though that's taken over for Tanner Morgan and him, lighting it up this year. Because Morgan wasn't a bad college quarterback. He had his moments.
He had one big season.
Yeah, well, they had really good receivers that year. It was
Yes,
that year
Tyler Johnson and Rashad
Yeah.
Bateman.
Yeah.
And like I said, they relied on Ibrahim. He was damn near their whole offense for a good chunk of the
I think you guys are
season.
a little starry-eyed toward big-time quarterbacks and high-flying offenses that give up 61 points to Appalachian State.
Well, they beat A&M too. So, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, they beat A&M too, didn't they?
Who?
Appalachian State.
Yes.
Yeah, please
So
don't
they're
bring
not
up
a terrible
Appalachian
team.
State, Mark.
They went
Yeah, you say okay. Yeah. I don't really like
Sorry.
saying.
Mike.
You're getting too many T-balls here.
Yes, yeah. Mark served that one up. I didn't. I hope you weren't going to have PTSD over there, Mike.
It's 15 years ago. I'm over it.
Yeah.
A&M's the new laugh at the App State lost team now.
Right. Yeah, boy, Jimbo. Oof. They're going to regret giving him $12 million down there, whatever they gave him this year. I think it's going to be a rough ending for him.
Oh, is it up to 12 now? I thought it was in like the 10.5 era.
Well, whatever it was way too much money.
Well, I just don't get it because it's not like there's a lack of talent. They have too many horses to be going sub 500.
Yeah, well, it's this year. It's going to be rough on that side of the division, and he's living off like me and Mark have talked about a good COVID year where they had 0 quality wins, barely beat a North Carolina team that was filled in half a football team, and
We'll give them one quality win.
all right, maybe
They beat Florida. They went to the SEC championship game.
they did. That's true. That was a great game. I watched that game.
Just trying to keep you in line, David.
Yeah, yeah, it was a good Kyle Trask Florida team. You're right. They gave Alabama their best game of the year that year too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Well, good stuff, man.
All right,
At least
gentlemen.
Yeah.
we could talk a little Big Ten football.
That's right.
Yeah, I
Thank you,
appreciate
David.
you having me on.
Yep,
Absolutely.
See you, Mark.
Glad to have you guys. All right. I think that brings us to an end here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate all of you being here. And wow, this is a Wednesday night, isn't it? That means Thursday. Listen up, folks. Let me have your attention. Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We are going to go through every season in the history of college football. We are going to right the wrongs. We are going to make history right. We are going to correct history. We're going to go through every season throughout the history of college football starting Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to go through the disputed national championships. And to me, that means we've got to go through every season. No, we are not doing a 24 or 48 or 53 or 109-hour marathon. We will shut down at some point and resume Friday night, and then probably have to resume Saturday night. But we will do that here at the Voice of College Football. Again, we hope you're excited about this. I know Will, wherever he is right now, Will is excited about our march through history, correcting national championship seasons. 8 o'clock Thursday night. Prior to that will be the South Carolina live show at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And over on the Clemson channel, it's either at 7 or at 9. They flip it back and forth. Stay tuned. Stay posted. the Clemson live show is on the Clemson channel on Thursday night as well. And we will see you here as we dispute national championships, 8 o'clock Eastern on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. And again, Shoelace Sooner, we're so happy for you. Thank you for bringing us the good news. God bless you and everyone else.